Okay, good evening, folks. We're broadcasting? Yes. I really apologize for this half-hour delay.
Recording in progress.
Apologize for the delay in getting started. We do now finally have our screens displaying properly. So we will get going. I'm Noah Levy. This is the November 2nd, 2023 meeting of the Humboldt County Planning Commission. And as always, I just want to quickly call your attention to the second page of our agenda, which outlines the ways that we can enable public remote participation or following along. If you are at a computer and are wishing to participate in the meeting remotely, please use the Zoom link that's provided at the top of page 2 of the agenda. You can also comment. You can also follow along by phone and comment by the phone. However, just be advised that if you are watching the Humboldt.legstar.com feed of the video, that runs a little bit behind real time. So if you're planning to watch that and phone in for something, do it a little bit earlier than you might think you need to. And with that, I would call the meeting to order and invite you to begin with a salute to the flag. Laura, could we please get a roll call of commissioners present?
Commissioner Scavdahl?
Here.
Commissioner Levy?
Here.
Commissioner Landry?
Here.
Commissioner Mulder?
Here.
Commissioner O'Neill?
Here.
Commissioner Mitchell?
Present.
Commissioner West?
Here.
Okay, we have all 7 of us tonight. That brings us to agenda modifications. Director Ford, could you speak to the modifications to the agenda that you're recommending?
I will. Thank you, Chair Levy. So on the consent calendar, item number 1, approval of the October 19th and October 23rd or October 26th action summaries are being pulled off, and we will bring those back at the meeting of November 16th. Moving down to the new business calendar, I'd like to announce a couple of things that we've received requests for continuances of. And the first is the High Art LLC conditional use permit. We have received a request from the applicant to continue that to the meeting in January. And we would recommend continuing that to the January 18th meeting. And then secondly is the Valadeo final subdivision and conditional use permit and planned unit development in the McKinleyville area. The applicant is not able to be here this evening, and we are recommending that that be continued to the meeting of November 16th. Now, with that being said, that leaves only one item on the new business agenda, which is the Emerald Mountain Coast LLC. And that is an item that is within the Supply Creek watershed, and we had put all of those on as public hearing items. But this item has, from staff's perspective, no issues associated with it. I would recommend that the chair survey the audience and survey the commission, and if there's nobody who has any objection, just move that onto the consent calendar. If anybody does wish to talk about it, I would recommend moving that up on the agenda before the short-term rental discussion and before the sign ordinance discussion to just finish that. It shouldn't be complicated.
Sounds good. Okay. And so I think what that means is we're going to essentially move the, I'll go through the consent agenda in a moment, see if anything needs to be pulled. And then can I seek to move the 3 public hearings, the 3 new business items to consent. In the case of Emerald Mountain Coast, it would be approval. In the case of the other 2, it would simply be the continuance of those.
I would ask that you do the high art separately, because that is a continuance. And
Okay.
And since there may be people who want to speak to the continuance on each
Sure.
of these individually,
And
that,
same with Valadeo.
same with Valadeo.
Okay. But I am gonna, based on your recommendation, I'm gonna do those items before we get to the, short-term rental ordinance and the sign ordinance. Okay? So, if you all heard that, I think that makes sense. So, before we get to that, though, let's now take public comment on non-agenda items. This is the point in the meeting when we poll the audience in person or on Zoom. If you have any comment you wish to make on a matter that pertains to the Planning Commission's jurisdiction, but which is not on our agenda for tonight. Is there anyone in the room wishing to comment on a matter that's not on our agenda tonight? Okay, don't see any hands in the room. I do see one hand on Zoom. So again, if there's anyone else on Zoom or phone wishing to speak on a matter that's not on our agenda tonight, now would be your opportunity. Seeing one hand there, I will recognize Ray and Adam. You have 3 minutes.
Hi guys, this is Adam. Very briefly, every so often I wonder if the county would discuss a dark sky ordinance, just because the more development we get, the brighter it gets. And one of the wonderful things about here, particularly if we're just a couple miles outside of town, is that we have fantastically dark skies. And I feel like we are at risk of losing some of that over the next couple of years. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Any other Zoom or phone participants wishing to comment on a matter that's not on our agenda tonight? Okay, seeing no hands, then I will close that segment of the agenda and bring us to the consent calendar. Oh yes, Commissioner West. You.
I just want to, can I briefly ask a question about a comment?
Sure.
Have we considered a dark sky ordinance, or will we be considering a dark sky ordinance?
Yes, we're currently working on a lighting ordinance, which should be to the commission as soon as the sign ordinance is done.
Great.
Great. Wonderful. Okay. Well, thank you for that time to comment. Okay, so now the consent agenda. I'll review that and see if there are any items that either the commission or members of the audience wish to pull for discussion. The first item is the October 19th and October 26th action summaries. Those are already being pulled at the request of staff to be brought back with a correction next time.
May I speak to the continuance, please?
Yes, certainly.
I just wanted to point out, as these are being continued, that I would have pulled for discussion the 19th, because I don't believe that we have yet firmly nailed out the process whereby amending motions that are seconded and voted on are reported or not. So I would want to bring that up as a discussion, or have staff recommend what the most logical way is to handle those.
Thank you. Yes. So that's an additional, yes, and Commissioner O'Neill.
So number 2, the VIPA farmers, I had a question of staff on that one, so.
Okay. Is it a real quick question for staff?
It could be.
We could then, we could handle that question.
That is actually a continuance.
Yeah,
So that one's continued?
yeah, are you aware that that one was being recommended for continuance? So
Pull back
hold
my
it.
question.
Okay, so yes. All right, so then we're pulling the first item, which is the action summaries. The second item is VIPA Farmers LLC in the Salmon Creek area. That item is being recommended for continuance to the next meeting, November 16th. Is there anyone on the commission or in the room or on Zoom wishing to comment on the continuance of VIPA Farmers? Seeing none, we will leave that on consent. The third item is similarly being continued to November 16th. That is Panther Rock Growers MBC in the Dinsmore area. Anyone wishing to comment on the continuance of that item? Okay, then that will be continued to the next meeting. The fourth item on consent is Watersong LLC conditional use permit in the Willow Creek area. This one is being recommended for approval. Is there anyone in the audience or on the commission wishing to comment on that item? Seeing no hands, that, oh, did,
I want to discuss even if it's for 2 minutes.
okay, real quick, you do have a question about that one then? Okay, then we'll pull that. And the fifth and final item on the consent calendar is the Gage and Amy Duran conditional use permit in the Scotia area. That is being recommended for approval. Conditional use permit. Is there anyone wishing to comment on that one or pull that for a discussion? Okay, seeing no hands in the room or on Zoom or on the commission, then that will stay on consent. Just to be clear then, on the first item, the action summaries, we're leaving it on consent with a recommendation to continue, correct? Or does that have to be pulled and make a separate motion?
It doesn't have to be pulled. We just pulled it. It's
Okay.
not a public hearing, so.
Got it. Okay. Well, then I would entertain a motion on items.
Chair, if I
yes,
could,
please.
we're going to survey about Emerald Mountain Coast.
Oh, yes, I'm so sorry. Yes, I was going to do that. Thank you for reminding me. As the director mentioned, the first public hearing item, Emerald Mountain Coast, in the Blue Lake area seems fairly routine and has no apparent controversy. Is there anyone on the commission who would object to moving that to the consent agenda and would prefer to have a separate discussion? Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to comment on that item? Okay, seeing no objections, then we will move that item as well to the consent agenda. But we'll handle the High Art and Valadeo separately, correct? Okay. So then with that, I would entertain a motion on the consent agenda.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move items 2, 3, 5, and new business item 1, as well as continue item 1 from the consent agenda.
Thank you. We have a motion from Commissioner Mitchell,
Second.
seconded by Commissioner Mulder. Any discussion on that motion before we vote? Okay, could we get a voice vote? All in favor of approving the consent calendar, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstain? Motion passes unanimously. Okay. Then we just need to check the order of events here.
Short-term.
We have the item pulled from consent, and I'd like to sort of handle the other stuff before we get into the ordinances. So
It's just item H is items pulled from consent.
I know, I see that it does appear later, but if nobody objects, I'd like to move that to now and also take care of the continuances that we discussed so that we can just be done with everything else but the ordinances.
That's your discretion as chair.
Yeah. So let's first do the two continuances that are listed as public hearings. The first one is High Arts LLC in the Willow Creek area. This was being recommended for denial. The applicant is requesting that it be continued to the January 18th meeting, and the staff has concurred with that. Is there anyone in the audience wishing to comment on the continuance of that item?
January 18th.
Did I? Yeah, January 18th. Got it. January 18th. Not seeing any hands up in the room or on Zoom. Any commissioners wishing to comment on the continuance of this item? Commissioner Scavdall.
So the project was being recommended for denial due to permit violations, erosion concerns, and whatnot. And I'm just curious how delaying to January, when we have concerns about erosion on that site, are, you know, is the applicant doing anything to mitigate any of that?
Yeah, I can address that. So there's a couple things. The applicant is contacting CDFW and trying to address some of those issues. The reason for the request for continuance and why planning staff is supporting it is the applicant lives on the East Coast and has just undergone shoulder surgery and believes he does want to be here in person to represent his project and believes he needs about a month and a half, according to his doctor, to be able to travel. So we did think that it's appropriate to give him the opportunity to be here in person to represent his application.
Commissioner Mulder.
I'd like to just piggyback on the question, because seeing the photos that took place from October, is there anything that the county can do to require straw wattle? Is there anything that could avoid the potential sediment from leaving those dirt graded flats into Supply Creek watershed?
So we have been in contact with the applicant, and actually we were prepared before his request for continuance to show some of the photos that he submitted. He has, since that site visit, been attempting to clean it up and has been sharing photos with the county. So we do believe he's working on that. And again, I think I anticipate Commissioner Mitchell's question. He's having people go up there and clean up the site. He's not actually there in person. He has also reached out to CDFW to try to work with them to address their concerns.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, if there's no further discussion on that, then I would welcome a motion to continue it.
I move to continue it to January 18th.
We have a motion by Commissioner Mitchell,
Second.
seconded by Commissioner Landry.
I just would like to have somebody go out there prior to us hearing it to see if the conditions have changed in a positive way. Because there's going to only be more erosion if, you know, you go in January and December.
Absolutely. I believe we will be able to do that as long as it isn't, you know, snowed in, given
Right,
the
Okay,
elevation.
thank
But
you.
we can attempt to do that.
Okay, thanks. Any further discussion on the motion? Yes, Commissioner, Director Ford.
Thank you. Just make sure we close public comment before.
Sorry. Okay, I will close public comment on this item. Yeah. And we have a motion and a second to continue to January 18th. If there's no further discussion, then I'd call for a voice vote. All in favor of the continuance, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstain? Okay, motion passes unanimously. High Art LLC is continued to January 18th. And then we have the Valadeo Final Map Subdivision, Conditional Use Permit, and Planned Unit Development in McKinleyville. This one we are just seeking to continue till the next meeting, November 16th. Is there anyone in the audience or on Zoom or phone wishing to comment on this item's continuance, or perhaps comment on the project if you're not able to attend the next meeting? If you'd like to comment, please, you can approach the podium.
Hi, Cindy Condit, 2082 Stevens Way in McKinleyville.
I think are you not hearing her? I've got it turned on.
We're
Yeah,
good?
if you could just get a
Okay.
little closer to the mic, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
And I live right in the neighborhood where the Valadeo subdivision is going to be going in. Are all of the plans now available for people to come down and see? I was in the planning office, and the last time they said we couldn't see them until after this meeting. So the drainage plans and the parking lots, it's all available for us.
All the plans that have been submitted, if I can, through the chair.
Please.
Pardon me for jumping in, are available. You should be able to see them. They should also be available through the Excella Citizens Access. And if they're not, please let me know.
Okay, will do. Well, we'll see you in a month then.
Thank you. 2 weeks.
Thank you. 2 weeks. Okay.
November 16th.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to comment on this matter which is being continued? Yes, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Dana Deason, and I live at 2085 Stevens Way. Again, the residential neighborhood that will abut this project. And I was just curious, when I was reading the report, maybe I just didn't see it, but I noticed it discussed sort of the usage, land usage to the south, to the southwest, and to the northwest of the property, proposed development property, but it didn't mention all of the residential neighborhoods to the east, northeast, and southeast. I'm wondering why we were left out of that report and what impact it would have, because it will change the scope of those neighborhoods having this project. And so was that intentional? Why were those neighborhoods not considered as part of the project?
If you're finished with your comment, I can refer that question to the staff.
Thank you.
Thank
And
you.
I will be back on the 16th too.
Thank you. Did you wish to respond to that at this time?
Not really prepared to respond to that, given that we were planning on having this continue, but we will have a response when it
Sure.
comes back.
Okay. Well, thank you. Your comment is noted, and the advantage of having this continued is that there will be a full public hearing, perhaps a revised staff report at that time. Okay. Seeing no other public comment, I will close public comment on this item. Wait, sorry, one hand just went up. I will recognize 1004 on the phone. If you were wishing to comment on the Valadeo subdivision, which is being continued, you can have 3 minutes to do that. If you can unmute, *6 to unmute, please. Public 1004. Yes, you're now unmuted. Can you go ahead and speak?
Yeah, excellent. Thank you very much, and I appreciate your indulgence for me. I won't be able to attend on the 16th. I lodged a couple of comments in the email back to the planning clerk before the Wednesday deadline, and I just wanted to highlight two of them that concern me. My name is William Henderson. I live at 1884 Gwynn Road. I'm at the intersection of Stevens Way or Stevens Road. I have two comments. One of them's around the Gwynn Road from Central up to where I live is not a county-maintained road, and we struggle with that road. I've lived here for 1 year and 2 days, and my concern is that the construction traffic is going to probably damage this road further, and I understand there's no remedy for repair other than, I guess, individual homeowners decide to take care of it. And so I formally want to request that that be brought up as an area of concern, because the construction traffic is bound to damage this road further, and there'll be no maintenance to be associated with the additional amount of traffic. And the second item is around off-street parking. This end of the Valadeo property will be adjacent to 32 one-bedroom units, and the plans appear to have one parking space, not allotted, but available for each of those units. But couples or people with guests are likely to park out on Gwynn Road. I'm really concerned about that because it's a fairly narrow road. So basically, in summary, I have some comments negative about both the roadway, Gwynn Road, and its safety and structural characteristics, and about the off-street parking that's likely to be a detriment to our community. And with that, I'll wrap it up, and thank you very much for your attention.
Well, thank you, Mr. Henderson, and thanks for your comment letter, which we did receive. Okay, seeing no other hands on Zoom or phone or in the room, I will close public comment on the Valadeo subdivision Again, this is being recommended for continuance to November 16th. Yes, Commissioner Mitchell.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move that we continue the Valadeo Final Map subdivision to November 16th.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Mitchell, seconded by Commissioner Skavdal. Any discussion on that motion before we vote? Then I would entertain a voice vote. All in favor of continuing this item to the next meeting, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstain? Okay, motion passes unanimously. Valadeo project is continued to November 16th. And then, let's just jump to the item pulled from consent, which I trust we can handle pretty quickly. That was the water song. Commissioner Mitchell, you asked that, you requested to ask a question of staff.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I try my best when reviewing a project to compare it against the standards or the precedents that we've followed in the past. And one item that I don't know what benchmark to use is the amount of water storage that's either too little or potentially too much. And I was just wondering if staff could explain how they determine whether there's sufficient water storage, and that way I could use that to understand how some cases we have 90% water storage, and others it's a much smaller percentage. Thank you.
Sure, I'll try to address that. So one of the things that we look at relative to water storage is, first, what's the source of water? And obviously, if it's a diversionary source, they're going to need enough water storage to last throughout the forbearance period. The other thing, if it is a well, we look at the well completion report and any information that we have relative to the well to identify whether we believe it is likely or has some potential to be connected to surface waters. We also look at the potential of the well to produce the amount of water needed for the application. And I guess thirdly, we look at the watershed itself and to see if that's a watershed that we have some concerns about. So for instance, I think 2 weeks ago, we heard a bunch of projects in the Supply Creek area where that was a concern raised by the Hoopa tribe. And interestingly, this project borders the Supply Creek watershed, but it's actually in the Minor Creek watershed, which is just to the west of Supply Creek. So we took that concern off the table. This application does have a well, which I noted an error actually in the staff report. The staff report says 4 gallons per minute, but the well completion report does say 15 gallons per minute. And so we were looking at that and determining that really it's a fairly decent producing well, and we did believe that there's it's likely to be able to contribute all of the water needs for the project. The last thing is that they do have a report from a licensed geologist, which indicates that the well is unlikely to be connected to any surface water features. And so for those reasons, we have not required any additional water storage for this project, although that is something that obviously is at the discretion of the Planning Commission.
Well, thank you for that explanation, and that addresses the concern that I have.
Okay, thanks. Any other questions? I will get to public comment, but any other questions from the commission about this item while we have Mr. Johnson on it? Okay, I do, since we've pulled it off of the consent calendar, I do want to see if there's anyone in the room or on Zoom or phone wishing to comment on this item, the Water Song LLC conditional use permit in the Willow Creek area. Seeing no hands up on Zoom or phone or in the room, I will close public comment on it and now just bring it back to if we're ready to approve this. I would entertain a motion.
I motion that we approve Water Song LLC's conditional use permit and adopt the resolution, which makes the following findings. Finds the Planning Commission has considered the addendum to the adopted negative declaration for the commercial medical marijuana land use ordinance that was prepared for Water Song project. Finds the proposed project complies with the general plan and zoning ordinance and approves the conditional use permit subject to the recommended conditions of approval.
Second.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion by Commissioner West, seconded by Commissioner Mitchell. Any further discussion on that motion? Then I would request a voice vote. All in favor of approving Water Song, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Say nay. Any abstain? Okay, motion passes unanimously, and the Water Song project is approved per staff recommendations. Okay, and now we have, I guess, about 2 hours and 20 minutes or so left to complete a review of the short-term rental ordinance that we started last meeting and have a public hearing on the sign ordinance. And I just want to restate for anyone who wasn't aware that when we continued the short-term rental ordinance at the last meeting, we had already taken and closed public comment, and since we were simply going to continue the staff presentation that we didn't have time to get through without any new information or new revisions, we are not having public comment on that item tonight. We will, however, bring it back for a public hearing with public comment at the next meeting, which is November 16th. Well, I'm assuming we're going to do that. So yes, with that, Mr. McNamara, please go ahead and maybe you can remind us where we had gotten to last time.
Absolutely. So where we left off was transferability. It's going to be 60.05.10.2.2 or page 5 in the inland ordinance. And as it currently reads, short-term rental permits are non-transferable. On a basis of public comment received and commissioner deliberations, we've added 2 alternatives. Alternative 5, which would allow transferability only to children or next of kin. And then alternative 6, which allows transferability from one entity to another or from one LLC to another or corporation to another. But basically, blanket transferability. If the commission has other wishes, you can propose those. But if not, we can go ahead and start off here.
I have a comment.
Commissioner O'Neill.
I think we should remove the transfer to your children or next of kin. You already have the alternative of the LLC, which anyone can create and put their kids in there. I just think for staff to be caught in the middle of, people saying, no, this is my kid, or I'm the kid, or I'm the next of kin. Probates take years, and it just sets up staff to be in a position that you don't want to be in. And so the owner could create an LLC, put their kids in there, and transfer it that way without putting staff in a position to be in the middle of family drama. I just don't, I've had to deal with unprobated properties and, family squabbles, and it's not a good place to be in. And how are you going to know when someone comes in and said, I'm the son, I'm the next of kin, I'm whatever?
Okay, thanks. Commissioner Mulder.
I'm looking at it from a different perspective. I know LLCs cost $800 per year per LLC plus the filing, so you're talking at least $1,000 a year minimum, probably just to keep an LLC alive. A lot of people are doing this to be able to pass, from testimony I've heard, to pass on something to their children. So I'm totally fine with alternative 5, and would, after hearing the rest of the commissioners' comments, I would be willing to make a motion to support alternative 5.
Commissioner West? I have a question about alternative 6 for staff. So this alternative is allowing transferability to pretty much anybody, correct? And it's just clarifying that you could transfer to an LLC and they need to, but it's not exclusively to LLCs, correct?
That is correct.
Great, thank you.
Commissioner Mitchell.
Thank you. This brings up, I guess, a broader topic I wanted to broach. I think it's really tricky for us to, from whole cloth, create what is a change in ownership technically defined as, and whether or not LLCs count or corporations. And just as a note, an LLC is not a corporation, so when we say other corporations, you should probably say something like other entities or something like that. But I would say that the assessor's office already has revenue and taxation code guidelines for when a substantial change of ownership exists, and a form is filled out for the assessor, the PCOR, the preliminary change in ownership report. And I think that we should piggyback off the definitions and their triggers for when a reassessment is appropriate, because my understanding is that when a majority ownership changes in an LLC or otherwise change in control, that would be a good flag for us to say, we have a whole new controlling interest, so we should probably make sure that they're aware of the requirements and make sure that they affirm that they'll follow them or issue a new one at that point.
So
Director?
I hear what you're saying, Commissioner Mitchell, but one of the things that I think I want to bring the commission back to is this is really a fairly simple decision between do you allow a transfer of these or not. You know, how all that gets done can be kind of worked out later. What the initial draft of the ordinance intended to do was say that they're not going to be transferred because we don't want these residential structures to become permanently devoted to a non-residential use. That's the basic idea behind the non-transferable provision as it's written. If the commission is not interested in that limitation, you know, then there's alternative 5 or alternative 6, which either allows it to be transferred to next of kin or children, and I understand next of kin probably needs to be defined, or just to remove the idea of that limitation altogether. So it's, I just want to make sure that we don't go down a deep, deep hole before getting to the core of what the decision point is.
I take your point, and I think that Commissioner Mitchell's point about the language that we use to describe LLC or other corporation, that same language appears in Alternative 1, which we covered last time, and approved. And so regardless of the decision about transferability, that's maybe a place where we should look at clarifying that language and aligning it with the other sections of county code or state code. Commissioner Mitchell, Mulder, forgive me. Oh, okay, Commissioner Mitchell.
So to make it a higher level, not in the weeds comment, I would say that there are circumstances that shouldn't be counted as change of ownership, such as I create an LLC that I own to isolate the risk of having this rental, and I'm just transferring it into it. The same beneficial owner is still me. Or if I create a living trust for my children and I put it in there, there's been no change of control. But I think that the policy should be that it's only transferable to the extent it's not a change in the beneficial interest. Whereas if my LLC has different owners, or I'm transferring it to another person, be it through probate or just giving it to a child, I think that it shouldn't be transferable in that case.
Commissioner Mulder.
So, in the testimony I've heard from the different workshops, I am in support of Alternative 5 because I feel that if someone's trying to build up something for their children or their next of kin, I think that's their right. And what I heard also in testimony was people asking not to turn these into commodities. Like if we chose Alternative 6, in my opinion, it would increase the likelihood of these being traded as commodities. and up the prices of them, and then also up the housing, and then I think it would go against, our intention of this ordinance. That's just so I'm just gonna be clear, I support alternative 5 because I feel it should be okay for someone to pass something on to next of kin or their children, and I do not support alternative 6.
Okay. Commissioner West.
To the commodities point, I think that is why I prefer the original language. I think any transferability makes it a commodity, and I don't think that this should be commodified.
Other thoughts on, did you have your hand up, Commissioner Mitchell? Yeah.
I guess I would propose an alternative 7 or 6 or 5A, or just a change to the non-transferable and just say, unless such transfer does not result in the change of beneficial owner. Such as I created a trust, and just like you could move your house into a trust, there's really no difference. It's still yours. Or you create an LLC to put your home in. There's really no change. That's the only reason I think they should be transferable, when it's really just putting it in a different pocket, but it's still on your person. But I agree that they should be non-transferable other than that.
Okay. Commissioner O'Neill.
I'm not opposed to it being transferred to my kids. I mean, I can put my kid as an owner on my house if I want to. I just think that the way it's written, it legally creates a big mess, because you're gonna have all these kids popping up saying, you know, it should come to me, or I'm the next of kin, and, you know, then you're gonna have to deal with a bunch of stuff, you know, and how's the county gonna know? If I just keep renting it out as the daughter, and you know, I'm just still the daughter, or I'm the next of kin, and I'm gonna keep renting it out and paying my, you know, taxes and stuff, and so it's just gonna be not finalized, and so I think there needs to be a legal process that makes it either I came in and put their name on the house, or notified the county before I died who I wanted to transfer to. I don't know, it just, this language doesn't sit right with me.
Okay, Commissioner Mulder.
So through the chair to staff, so I'm in support of alternative 5. Is there any language that might be able to be helpful? Say, I own a short-term rental, and I don't want to do an LLC, and I don't want to do a living trust, but I do have a will, and it was willed to 2 children. Is there a way that we can make some language to make that legal to transfer that STR?
Yes, there is, I'm sure, and we do absolutely hear Commissioner Mitchell's concern about the beneficial ownership. But we agree that's a valid point that needs to be addressed. Given the fact that there is concern with the language that's here, maybe it would be helpful to take a step back and have the commission decide conceptually
Yes.
where you
I'm
want to
thinking.
get to.
Yeah.
And then give direction in terms of what you want to accomplish, and then we'll bring back language on the 16th.
That's what I was going to suggest as well. I mean, I think with Commissioner Mitchell's point noted, that we may need to have some slightly more nuanced language about what ownership means, or what wouldn't constitute a transfer. We have 2 clear alternatives here, and I'd actually like to just take a vote on each, starting with alternative 6, which would be the most unrestricted. That would allow transfer basically freely. I don't hear much, if any, support for that, but I just thought we should address that, and then we'll go to alternative 5. So can I, if you guys are okay with that, I'd just like to have a straw poll, as it were, on alternative 6, the idea that this would allow transfer freely.
Should I make a motion to reject alternative 6? Is that how we've been doing it? That seems how I saw it.
I guess that is what I'm asking for here.
I move to reject alternative 6.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. A motion by Commissioner Mitchell, seconded by Commissioner Mulder, to reject alternative 6. All in favor of rejecting alternative 6, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed to that motion? No. Okay, so that's unanimous. We reject alternative 6.
So I would make a motion to conceptually be in support of alternative 5, although not in support of the exact language, and direct staff to come back with the language to support being able to pass property or the STR on to children, but also possibly looking at the language of, I don't know the exact word that Commissioner Mitchell used, but change of beneficiary, to look at that conceptually.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Mulder, seconded by Commissioner Landry. Any further discussion on this motion, or are we ready to vote? Okay, then let's have a roll call vote on this one, please.
Roll call.
Thank you.
Commissioner Scavdall,
Yes.
Commissioner Levy,
Yes.
Commissioner Landry,
Yes.
Commissioner Mulder,
Yes.
Commissioner O'Neill,
Yes.
Commissioner Mitchell,
Yes.
Commissioner West.
No.
Okay, so that motion passes 6-1. So we are recommending that the staff come back with some version of alternative 5 in the next revision, taking into account the legal nuances of beneficial ownership. Okay, thanks. And now back to Mr.
Could I just ask
Oh,
a
yes.
couple of clarifying
Okay,
questions?
please.
So the conceptual idea is we clearly want a strong definition overall of beneficial ownership and what that means, separate from alternative 5. But in alternative 5, we're looking for the ability to transfer it to children, immediate family, cousins.
Well, motion maker?
So I heard, from what I heard from Commissioner Mitchell, was like the concept of having a living trust. So that could be, include family members. I would think if I'm not as well educated in the terminology you were using, but if with the concept you were stating, I would be in support of that concept if it was something that could come back legally.
So I would just point out that if it were in a living trust, that would be the owner. That would not change with the death of an individual.
That's kind of what I thought, but I was hearing from Commissioner Mitchell, we needed to hone in on that maybe. I don't know.
So I guess if I were doing this, I would go to what exemptions there are from reassessment and look at many of those as being reasons why we would have exemptions to allow the transfer. Not all of them will be applicable, but I would start there.
Please say that for me again. Exemptions to reassessment?
Yes, in the assessor's office, there's a checklist on the preliminary change of ownership report. It's searching for exceptions which would preclude you from having your property taxes reassessed. I see a lot of parallels in what we're trying to do here and what they already do. But without getting into the weeds, yes, putting it into a living trust would not be a change of ownership. And what we just voted on, I think should come back and be sort of parent to child direct family member, as opposed to I'm just giving it to my cousin Cletus and that's next of kin.
If I may jump in, I feel like we were all governed by the simple language that is there in Alternative 5 now, in terms of the general intent of what I think we were voting on. Commissioner Mulder, would you agree?
After getting some more clarification on the living trust thing, I would say that would be the intent. It was like, the testimony I heard is direct, someone's trying to build something for their children, or like a direct family member, not a third cousin from another
Right.
state.
Yep.
I just think it
Commissioner
should
O'Neill.
be legal. and I'm not sure, is this legal? Is someone gonna come in and say, well, you're discriminating, saying I can't leave it to my niece instead of my kid, I don't have any kids. So, and then I just want it to be legal and in a way that isn't a problem, because you're gonna have one kid coming in and another kid coming in saying, why are you letting them do it? You know, and you don't need to be in that situation. I've been in that situation, in those rooms where they're squabbling back and forth, because you're talking about money and assets. So if it was in their will, and they have a will, which people then fake those and, you know, lose them and all kinds of things go on. You don't want to be there, is where I'm going. So legally, if you can write it up in a manner that it's, you know, it leaves you guys out of the family squabbles, and it passes, you know, I don't know if there's a form they fill out to designate who that person is in advance, but you don't want to be there. I've been in those rooms, people are crying, they're bringing up family drama, all kinds of stuff, and you become the mediator.
Through the chair, I had a comment about the intentions as far as what I'm understanding this conversation to be, and that is that we're not eliminating that ability, but that we're careful in attempting to allow it and to prevent the commoditization of these structures.
Okay. Commissioner Mitchell.
I guess I would seek clarification on, and to address Commissioner O'Neill's concern, that perhaps the permit could pass with the property through a probate or trust or other intestate, you know, process, and that would remove us completely, and it would just follow whoever the probate or trustee determines is going to own it. So that only leaves the question of, other than through death, can we give it to anyone who we're related to, or is that just immediate family? I would think if we're just going to give it, it would be immediate family, but it's so broad.
I think the issue, I appreciate what you're saying. I'm not arguing at all here, but the way I understand it is, A, that it passes to a child. B, that it's through a legal mechanism that can be submitted for the county's review. Right. So we clearly hear that. We got it. We got the yellow line and the white line. We know the lane.
Great.
Okay.
I'm happy with that.
Great. So then, can we move on? Or if staff is ready to move on, then let's go ahead. Mr. McNamara, move us forward, please.
Thank you. All right, so moving forward, we are now at per person limit. As it's written, it allows for a individual or business to not own more than 5 parcels with short-term rentals, being that you can only have one short-term rental per parcel. So we have alternative 7, which removes a cap per person. And we also have alternative 8, which has been left blank for the commission to propose a number that they find equitable to the public.
Okay. Commissioner Scavdall.
So I'm going to jump in early on this, because I think I probably have a minority opinion, but I'm going to express it before you start debating what the right number is going to be. I prefer alternative 7, which is to strike this restriction in ownership altogether. I don't think that the land planning process should be used to limit ownership or who can own a business or how many businesses a person can own. And I think we use the cap to do that. So we've placed a cap on how many STRs there can be in the county. But I think when we drop down the next level and we start trying to control ownership, we're going down a slippery slope. And I'm concerned how this type of limitation may go over to other types of businesses or other types of permits, like farms, for example, or what about long-term rentals, or what about how many properties you can actually own, or what about people that own from out of the area that just own vacation homes up here, that don't rent them. So where are we going with this? My preference is that we don't walk into this path, and that we let the cap and the market go. I don't think we actually, I appreciate the concern, I really do, that we could perhaps be threatened by large out-of-town corporations coming in and buying up a number of homes in this area. I haven't seen any evidence that that's real. Most of the people that we've heard from in public comment are local owners talking about their businesses. I haven't really heard that issue exists. So that's my preference, is that I'll just leave it at that we go with alternative 7.
Okay, thank you. Other commissioners? Yes, Commissioner O'Neill.
Do we have any kind of statistics on that? Out of town, how many, like, average or the total number? I mean, is there anything to back up that we're fixing a problem that we don't need to fix?
We do not have a list of all the owners of all the properties that are being used as short-term rentals.
I think that there should be a limit, and the reason is, I don't equate this to like businesses in the same sense of how many, Ace Hardwares you own. It's residential homes that we're trying to preserve, and that's the whole point of all this, or we wouldn't even have any regulation at all. But we're saying that we want long-term rentals, and we want houses on the market, and if you have one person with 20 of them, to me, I think it's a good idea that they're out there for people who want to supplement their income. And if you let one person dominate, or several people who, can dominate the market, then it takes away from the ability of another individual who just wants to supplement their income, and has 1 or 2, as opposed to, I have 20 and there's no more left for you. And I think we should spread it around. This is my thought.
Okay, Commissioner Mulder and then Commissioner Mitchell.
I think Commissioner Mitchell was before me.
Okay, sure.
So I just want to recognize that in the past, what was thought of as a land use decision furthered income and other social injustices, such as redlining and other things. In this case, I want to recognize that we are going to be permitting what otherwise could be affordable or housing for working folks is going to be used in lieu of hotels or corporate type of activities. And I feel that it's appropriate to be mindful of the things I just mentioned and not allow a huge concentration of folks that are already at the top echelons of wealth at the cost of potentially those that are at the lower rung. I also think that this could be looked at in 2 ways. One, who's the owner or who's benefiting it, but also if someone's running them poorly or skirting the rules, we wouldn't want someone to be controlling 30 different rentals if they're not following the rules. And so I might propose that whatever the number is, if someone's just investing as a minority or non-controlling interest holder, that they have the equivalent of whatever that number is. So they could own a third of 15 would be the same as owning 5 for that purpose, but also not control more than X number, or they're the ones running the show. I think there's 2 separate policy goals there, and I could definitely justify moving the 5 down lower.
Commissioner Mulder.
So, for me, I would say I'm not comfortable with going below what's written already with the 5. Actually, Commissioner Scavdall almost, with his comments, actually almost got me to support not having a cap and letting it sort itself out. I feel that we're trying to make land use decisions, and although I hear your comments, I don't know that saying just because someone has multiple properties means they're in some upper echelon or something like that. It's very challenging for me to hear that a lot of times, because people have to go through a lot of work, a lot of stress to manage those kind of things. And just because you may have multiple properties doesn't mean your life is easy. I feel that it is a business that we're permitting, and I don't know that we should get too deep into regulating. I don't support the algebra idea of like the minor ownership. I think that would be really, really hard for staff. I'm willing to hear what everyone has to say, but I would say I'm good with 5. In all the testimony I've heard, I haven't heard a big amount of testimony to lead me to believe we need to go below the 5 threshold.
I'm just going to jump in real quick. I don't want to take a lot of time and say that I would support not only keeping a cap but lowering the cap. I don't think I need to get into the reasons since others have probably spoken to my reasons. But just since we're sort of polling where people stand, Commissioner Landry, were you about to speak?
Yes, and I guess I'm interested in what our staff's rationale to pick that number was, because maybe there is some deep thought already put towards that, and so maybe let's hear that piece of information.
I don't know that there's a deep rationale for 5. Okay, so.
Commissioner West.
You've all heard me say that I support a cap, so I won't dive into the details on that again. But 5 is tolerable. I'd really like to see us go closer to 1 or between 1 and 3 personally.
Well, since we've, I guess, all had a chance to speak to this, maybe we should start with alternative 7, which is the furthest change from the existing would be to remove the cap altogether and not limit how many short-term rental permits or parcels with short-term rentals a person or business can own. Yes, Commissioner Mulder.
I'd like to, before we vote on that, I would actually like to make a motion to approve the language as is, not using alternative 7 or 8.
Okay, well, that's your right. We've got a motion to basically reject both alternative 7 and 8 and stick with the existing language that specifies that you may not own more than 5 parcels with short-term rentals permits. Okay, we have a motion and a second to. This is just, if you have this is basically their motion would be to keep the existing language as in the ordinance now, which says per person limit, an individual or business shall not own more than 5 parcels with short-term rental permits.
We're voting to keep that?
That's the motion that was made, to keep it at,
If we want it to be less, then we vote against it.
yes. So is everybody clear on the motion then? Can we get a roll call just for clarity on this one, please?
Commissioner West,
No.
Commissioner Mitchell,
No.
Commissioner O'Neill,
No.
Commissioner Mulder,
Yes.
Commissioner Landry,
No.
Commissioner Levy,
No.
Commissioner Scavdall,
Yes.
Okay, the motion fails 2-5.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Commissioner Landry.
I move that we go with alternative 8 and put a cap of 3.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion to change that per person limit to 3 parcels with short-term rentals per business or individual. That's Commissioner Landry's motion, seconded by Commissioner Mitchell, was it? And yes, you have a comment?
I guess I would want to add that I would be open to staff bringing back, if someone were to own 2% of 3, that seems like an unfair distinction versus someone who owns 100% of 3. And if it was 3 or the equivalent, I would be just as happy to support that. But that's giving more flexibility to landowners, and if no one else is interested in that, then I'm okay voting with it as is, with 3.
Yes, Director Ford.
I truly appreciate the effort that you're going to, Commissioner Mitchell, but I don't want to say that that can't be done, but practically, that would be nearly impossible to enforce.
Okay. Yes, Commissioner Scavdall.
I'll ultimately support this, but I think it's a feel-good motion that does very little other than diversify ownership of already impacted market and doesn't limit ownership of how many people can own in any incorporated city like Eureka or Trinidad or Fortuna or Ferndale and or Mendocino County or anywhere else. So again, if it makes you feel good, we can do this, but I think it's just adding complication to an ordinance.
Commissioner Mulder.
So, I appreciate the commission. I appreciate your thought process to get there. I'm in the minority and don't agree, and I can't support it because I don't believe there's been enough rationale to get there. I'm fine with being the odd one out, so I'm looking forward to moving on to the next thing after this vote, but I will not be in support of it.
Any other comment before we vote on this?
So we're voting on 3.
Voting on changing that limit to 3 per person or business. Can we get a roll call vote on this, please?
Commissioner Levy?
Yes.
Commissioner Scavdall?
No.
Commissioner Landry?
Yes.
Commissioner Mulder?
No.
Commissioner O'Neill?
Yes.
Commissioner Mitchell?
Yes.
Commissioner West?
Yes.
Okay, motion passes 5-2, and we will change that to a limit of 3. Yes, Commissioner
So
O'Neill.
when they originally come in and you're gonna grandfather people in, will the 3 apply?
That's not currently written into the ordinance.
So they could come in with 5 if
Yep.
they already had 5?
Yep.
We're just talking about new ones, which
Right.
we already know there's not gonna be that many new ones, you know, because you already kind of have an estimate. Talking about 400 or so maybe.
There's 600, about 600.
That could come in
that could
addition
come
to
in.
what you
Yep.
think's gonna walk in, but you don't know until you open it up.
Right.
Okay.
Commissioner Mulder?
That brings up an interesting question. These STRs, as we approved last time, as long as they're operating, just what I just heard now, could somebody technically take over operating and still grandfather those in, or would it only be proof of person A beforehand? Just something I didn't even think of until you spoke earlier.
Somebody would have to demonstrate that they're the operator to be vested like that.
Okay, thank you.
And is it a given that this, as worded in this ordinance where it fits into, is it a given that it would not apply to any pre-existing, only to new permits that are sought after the ordinance passes?
Well, there's the provision above, and we can go back and look at that if you'd like, that we're basically allowing people to come in. And they may have to go through the special permit process, but
Yeah.
for the most part, the limitations are being set aside to allow pre-existing operators to be approved.
Yeah, I mean, we certainly and very explicitly discussed that they would be exempt from the overall 2% cap and the limits on density. I guess it follows that this would sort of be treated the same as that.
Yeah, and some of I think the thing that's important to think about are the things that would exclude somebody from entry up front. The things you mentioned, the cap, density, how many are owned, are things that are different than operational. So it's those things that they'd be grandfathered into, but the operational requirements, there's no grandfathering.
Right, right.
Um,
Okay, well, then I guess we should move on to the next item, please.
That sounds good. Also, just a reminder, Commission unanimously approved October 26th as the date forward or date present for existing. So from that day forward, somebody wouldn't say be able to go and establish what is considered non-conforming and existing, not countable to the cap. So
Yeah, and I think we were
just wanted to
unanimously.
make that clear.
Right, thank you.
No problem. All right, moving forward, this next portion was added for clarification that no violations shall exist, no active violations shall exist on a parcel for somebody to receive a short-term rental permit. This is just a text addition. If you guys are all right with that, we can move forward.
If anybody has a comment on something that's not highlighted or boxed as an alternative, and I don't think there actually are any more of those. Yeah, I mean that. So we can either get to that at the end, but if it's a comment on something that's in the text already, are we all good with the resource zone districts provision as worded? It's 60.05.10.2.4. It's up there on the screen.
Got it.
Yep, okay. I mean, I guess I just had the question about this one. I understood the rationale for this if it pertains to a property that's receiving a tax benefit, property tax break, that would be TPZ or a Williamson Act parcel. I guess I'm not quite as clear what the rationale is for limiting it to farm stays for properties where that doesn't apply. I don't know if you want to speak to that.
Yeah, so the intent for this to be permitted as a farm stay is to incorporate an educational aspect along with the short-term rental. And that's primarily because we don't want to see these natural resource lands being bought up and utilized for short-term rentals. We'd like to see them used for their intended purpose, which is, timber harvest, agricultural productivity, etc.
Okay, that's persuasive. Yes, Commissioner Mulder.
Yeah, I guess I understand that, but also, correct me if I'm wrong, you're still allowed to develop 2 acres for residential purposes on each one of those parcels. Is that correct or incorrect?
It's a little bit nuanced, so I think that you're speaking to what is considered a curtilage area, and that is allowable in timberland production.
Okay, so I'm just trying to limit this to farm stays. I'm just trying to understand the rationale. If you're allowed that 2 acres of curtilage, why we would limit that to not be able to just be an STR without a farm stay, I guess.
Maybe it's an overgeneralization, but our resource lands are, as Mr. McNamara mentioned, are intended for designated purposes, whether it be forestry or whether it be some kind of agriculture or both. And so wanting one to indicate that yes, residences are allowed on these parcels. Traditionally, the residences were allowed to support the natural resource use of the parcel, not as a separate use. The general plan in 2017 allowed residences as a by right use, not in association with the natural resource use of the property. But it's another step to then convert that into a commercial use of transient occupancy onto property that is designated for natural resource production. Some of these will include Williamson Act parcels that are receiving tax breaks. Some of them will be under TPZ, which are receiving tax breaks. And that probably is the dominant objective, but it's hard to then tell whether or not it's a Williamson Act or a TPZ zone. It's much clearer to stay with a resource zone district.
Okay, sure.
So through the chair, I think that's what I'm hearing you say is to better protect the resources. If you include it being a farm stay, the county believes it's less likely to eventually lose the resource.
Well, by if I could, Chair, by limiting it to a farm stay, then that activity associated with the short-term rental is also going to integrate into the natural resource use of the property. So people are going to have some sense of what it is to live in a timber area and what timber harvesting is about. Or some of the farm stays that we've seen and seen approved, primarily down around Ferndale, I mean, they provide tours of the dairies. They provide tours of the agricultural uses going on out there. They get to go see the grass being harvested or the hay being harvested or something like that. And so, there's kind of a use there that really benefits the long-term maintenance of that property as a resource property. So that becomes an attribute of the resource property rather than something that's encouraging the property to be broken up and converted to other commercial uses.
Makes sense. Thank you very much.
Commissioner Mitchell.
I guess I wanted to make a counterpoint based on what I've observed as part of the Assessment Appeals Board, which is many of these resource lands are not financially viable. There's a lot of grazing land that generates $7,000 for 400 acres. And so if there were existing buildings or outbuildings that could be utilized for short-term rentals, it could potentially help keep resource lands financially viable and thus in the state that we want them to stay in. And so I would say that if there were a special permit or a process whereby they show that a short-term rental would not interfere with the productivity and long-term viability, that I would want to consider that, because I think there are financial pressures on resource lands because the activity that they're zoned or able to do don't make them financially viable.
I would submit that that's just what I just tried to describe as a farm stay. That's why we're limiting it to a farm stay, because it's continuing, recognizing that additional income is beneficial to retaining the property in its larger form rather than breaking it up and selling it. So it provides additional income. By having it be a farm stay, it relates to that resource use and provides additional income to that resource use, so that there's not a encouragement to subdivide the property, sell it off.
So I realize that we're mostly saying the same thing, but in reading what the farm stay includes, I could see situations where folks just want to rent it because of the beautiful view and don't want to participate in the things that would make it a farm stay, and therefore we're going to have some sort of phony baloney in order to meet that. And so I was just suggesting that it be allowed another way without having to purport to have it be a farm stay.
That's fine. That's very much a policy issue, and I heard you mention a special permit, and if it's the desire of the commission to allow short-term rentals within resource zones subject to a special permit with whatever criteria, happy to make that amendment.
Commissioner Mulder.
I'm torn on this one because I actually really like resource lands, and I kind of liked what the director was saying, that if it has to be a farm stay, then it kind of helps educate the people that are coming to our community. And then I also hear you about people, special permit. I think long-term viability, I mean, I think it'd be pretty cool for the farm stay on it, like using that farm stay. But I'm not opposed to the idea of a special permit, is kind of where I'm at.
I guess I think on balance, I do hear both sides of this. I hear your point, Commissioner Mitchell, but I don't think the requirements of a farm stay are overly burdensome, and they just do force the short-term rental to have some nexus, some tie-in to informing the guests about the resource lands that they're on, and I don't feel like it's excluding anybody from being able to supplement their farm income with this, so. But if we want to make a motion to change this, I'm open to making a motion.
I guess just a brief counterpoint is that a special permit would be more restrictive, and it would ensure that there's no conflict created by having, this other use. Whereas a farm stay seems to be fairly, not only easy to accomplish, but also easy to pretend to accomplish. So I think it's more protective perhaps to do a special permit, but I'm happy to vote either way.
I like it as it reads right now.
All right, well,
I'm fine with it.
if nobody's going to make a motion to change it, then I think we'll just, by default, leave it how it is.
Do we technically need to make a motion to accept the highlighted language? That's kind of what we did on some of the other parts in the new language
Thank you.
beforehand.
That has been our practice for things that were in an alternative box or in highlighted, that we would have a motion to discuss it, or have a motion to accept it.
I would just say the highlighted provisions are provisions that were added in response to direction from the commission.
Sure.
So you've already given that direction. And if this captures your intent,
Fair
then you
enough.
don't really need to do anything with it.
Fair enough, and if there's I don't hear any questions being asked about this.
There's just one, would it be a permit shall not be issued, are we talking about that one?
Yes.
A permit shall not be issued or renewed? Would it apply to renewals also?
The renewal section has that provision in it
Because
also.
if I've never operated one, I shouldn't have a violation.
Well, this really is something that we put in there to address the pre-existing uses, so that the one caveat to pre-existing is that if they have unresolved violations and they've continued to operate in violation, they're not going to be eligible for a permit.
But if there's never been an ordinance, what are they in violation of?
So there currently is not an allowance for short-term rentals in Humboldt County.
So they would all be in violation?
Well, so we do get complaints. And so some of them have code enforcement actions against them. We get probably at least a complaint a week on short-term rentals alone. And so some of the people are really, really responsive and come in and talk to us. They stop the activity, they stop taking reservations, they take it down off the internet and are really good. Other people continue to operate, continue to advertise, continue to allow loud parties, continue to allow things that really disrupt the neighborhood.
So if it said will not be issued or renewed, because that would apply to someone who's coming in on the renewal process after the ordinance has already been passed, and you get all these calls, and then you wouldn't want to renew it, because they automatically get renewed, right?
I'm fine with adding renewal in there too, but the renewal section also says this.
All right.
Okay. So with that clarification, thank you.
Yeah,
I
I'm fine.
think we're all fine with this provision? Yeah? Okay. Now, at this point, I had hoped that we could be through this by now, but it is 8 o'clock, and I should offer to take a 10-minute break now, a little bit later than usual. So let's come back, in 10 minutes, please. Peggy? Yeah. Yep. Okay, so we are going to reconvene the meeting. I'm hoping we can get through the rest of this pretty quickly so that we still do have an hour for the sign ordinance. That's not a lot. But so let's see if we can get through the rest of this in 15 minutes or so, if possible. There is, I guess, only one more identified alternative, and nothing else that's changed since the last revision. Is that correct, Mr. McNamara?
That is correct.
So, really what you've been going through is just looking at the changes or the alternatives, not every provision.
Yeah, and unless the commission has text amendments they'd like to propose for a specific section, I've only been going to the actual changes that were presented.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, so we're down to the last. I mean, basically where we got to is the bottom of page 5, where we get to standards for short-term rentals. There is one more alternative on the end of page 7, but otherwise there wouldn't be anything else new. Commissioner Mulder, you have your hand up.
So if we're gonna jump through, I don't want to skip past page 6.
Yes.
The per partial limit, I would really like to entertain the idea of having 3, up to 3 short-term rentals per parcel.
Oh, yes, Commissioner Mitchell.
I guess, would it depend on how big the parcel is? It seems 3 could be a lot for some, but very insignificant for others.
Sorry, we talked about this 2 meetings ago. I want to, and I think we were in the 5-acre, maybe 10-acre minimum, somewhere in that ballpark, because there was testimony from people that had a house and a couple of other house structures on the property, and it would fall under the guidance of almost like, I can't remember earlier on, like owner occupied, but I can't remember the exact term of that. But I'm just saying that per parcel limit, I would be good with up to 3 per legal parcel if they were on parcels of 5 acres in size or larger.
Okay, so now on this, in past discussion of this provision, one version that had been proposed, I think, by Commissioner Scavdall would be that could be expanded if there is an on-site owner or caretaker. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think that's what I wrote down that you said.
That's what we discussed. I don't remember what section. When we were having that topic, obviously it wasn't down.
Yeah, well, it may have been, I thought of it as being most closely related to this provision that Commissioner Mulder just read, down towards the bottom of page 6, the per parcel limit. Yes, Commissioner West, I see your hand is up.
I had a question about the intention behind this. Would, if we were to allow multiple per a parcel, would it be considered one permit? Like, how does this count towards our caps?
It would count as 3 units. Could I make a recommendation perhaps, because to change the number that's allowed would change a number, there's kind of all kinds of things that would change within the ordinance. It's not just changing one section. So I think if the commission is interested in doing something different than what's proposed here with 1 per parcel, if the commission would like to say you could have multiple with an owner or somebody living on site, that you just give direction to go and do that, and then we can go and make all the changes that are necessary to capture that, because you're not going to do it in just one section.
Okay. Commissioner Mulder?
With that said, I would like to make a motion to give direction to staff under per parcel limit that on properties 5 acres or larger with the owner or operator living on property. We would allow up to 3 STRs per legal parcel.
We have a motion from Commissioner Mulder. Oh, well, yes, Commissioner West.
I just have another clarification question with the number 3. So 3 short-term rentals, would that include if they were able to home share? Or is that, would there be a 4th home share allowed in there?
I would assume from the testimony I've heard all around, I think the third, one of them would have to be like a home share, and then there was 2 separate units is kind of what I've heard in testimony out there.
So that's what you were specifically asking them to bring back?
I guess I didn't clarify that. I just, alternative possibility for second home or third is the notes I have from when I first went through this. So I'm going right back to that note, and questions are helping spark my
And
mind.
I just want to remind us that this already would have been allowed with a special permit, could be allowed with a special permit to exceed the 1 per parcel.
I retract my emotion.
Oh, really? Yeah, you can do it.
And I was going to make that same comment. I think that's where we ended up last time, in sort of in the keep it simple mode of this
Yeah.
ordinance. Up above, under 60.05, .10, .3, .2,
Yep.
it does say exceptions to standards C through G may be sought with a special permit.
Right. So, yeah. So they've got a path. Yes, it is a more expensive permit, but it's not necessarily a more difficult process to do it. So are we then?
I retracted my
Good with
motion,
this?
so we're
Okay.
skip page 6 and probably moving on to 7 where the
And
alternative-
if I can just really quickly say, because I feel like I already said this last time, that I thought on the middle of page 6, the headers, the good neighborhood quality and public nuisance, maybe this one is good. I wanted to make sure that we're being sort of consistent in how we apply these sort of density requirement triggers, as it were. And there was some discussion very early in the ordinance about maybe there was some language up front that seemed to be overly restrictive of larger parcels. Here, that maybe is not a problem because this is only applying to 10 acres or smaller, or that are within a community plan area, and parcels where the short-term rental is located within. Okay, and so we've got 3 different conditions that could trigger this, but actually they may all be, I don't have a problem with them. Just wanted to read them again.
Comments on page 6? I have
Yeah,
one.
please.
So under the safety, you have that fire extinguishers, smoke detectors. That sounds really good, but I think there should be a separate bullet that says that they need to have an on-site safety plan with, that outlines things like, your evacuation routes could be separate, and your tsunami evacuation routes, your locations of hospitals, all that, and that needs to be present in the maximum occupancy needs to be present in the, like when you're in a motel, there's a book, and I always read them, and there's information about safety in there, and instead of just saying you gotta do it, it's gotta be a safety plan in the room itself or the house itself. And there'd be just another bullet separated out, rewrite it a little bit, and we don't have to vote on it or anything.
I think, is that a consensus that the commission would want to see in there? We're fine with that.
What do you guys think?
I'm fine with that too, and I'll just make a comment. Earlier, we approved in consent when we looked at the former Scotia Hospital units. They had an operations plan in there that had a really good example of that type of information in their operations plan. They also had noise meters which I did some research on, which were pretty cool. And there's an app that they, on their noise meters, on this company they were using, that sends you a text when noise goes over a certain decibel.
Wow.
So those things are available. I thought that was pretty cool.
It's just, you have people, you know, coming from out of the area, they don't know what's here necessarily. They don't know
Sure.
that they're not safe if there's a tsunami.
Okay, so we'll have them bring back something that speaks to that suggestion. Yes, Commissioner Mulder.
So, just, this is information I've run into out there in the world. The Good Neighbor Guide, it doesn't apply to parcels that are bigger than 10 acres. But should we, I guess this question is through the chair to staff, what about shared roads or speed limits or anything like that as far as parcels that, 15-acre parcel or larger? Is there anything that we could touch in there to kind of cover that? Or would that be an overstep?
No, I thought we put something in about roads.
Well, I mean, right there, it does say, and to the nearest 5 neighbors up and down the access road under Good Neighbor Guide.
But if I had a 15-acre parcel, I don't have to follow that. That's kind of what and maybe I'm misreading
The
it.
provision above does address access. See, access roads shall be built to a Category 3 standard. If there's a private road and established RMA, the permit holder shall be a member in good standing.
I'm going more along of, like, I see all that, but I'm going more along the lines of shared road. Someone could be driving like way over the speed limit of what everyone drives in that area and cause an accident or hit a vehicle.
So the Good Neighbor Guide should include road conduct.
That etiquette.
Yeah.
But his point is that, if I understand you, Commissioner Mulder, that the Good Neighbor Guide isn't a requirement if you're dealing with a parcel that's over 10 acres.
Correct. That's the way I'm reading it, and I would like it to somehow include some sort of road etiquette or something like that, because there's some of these are gonna pop up and already are existing on parcels larger than 10 acres. So I would like there to be something to respect other property owners on the road, that really the biggest impact to them is going to be people traveling on the roadway, and if they aren't familiar with the roadway or the etiquette, like yield to uphill traffic on narrow roads, you see someone coming, you pull over in the wide spot and allow to pass. Those kind of things would be good to touch in on there.
Okay, so we can add that into the Good Neighbor Guide and make that part of our rationale. I mean, it's nearly impossible to enforce road etiquette because you don't know who really is driving.
I understand that, but just a hypothetical, that there's license plate numbers you give whenever you rent an STR. A lot of times people give license plate numbers, and that license plate number happens to be in a accident. Then there's a CHP police report. Then that would, and CHP police or CHP did a study, and it proved that that vehicle was at fault for driving too fast. Then that would provide evidence to submit to the county of like, hey, this STR is not operating in compliance.
Well, so just, sorry, this may not be my place to make this point, but is it the operator that's out of compliance or a individual renter who misbehaved? I mean, we can identify that they should have etiquette when they're driving on the road, but that's really hard to regulate. I just want to say that.
I understand
And I
it's hard.
don't want to create false impressions that somehow we're going to solve people's road rage issues through a STR ordinance.
Would it, I guess, through the chair, would it be an overstep to at least include some sort of language that renters will be provided road etiquette and, you know, they're gonna sign it and it's more so that way they're educated? And maybe it's not something that can be as heavily regulated, but it's something that at least they're educated, and maybe it's an overstep, maybe it's not. I can just think of a few instances where this has caused an issue.
If it's the desire of the commission for us to put that in as a required component of the lease, when they sign the lease, we're happy to do that.
What's the feeling? No? I see shaking heads.
I would say I appreciate where Commissioner Mulder's going in protecting our community from folks who maybe don't have a familiarity. So those sentiments, I get it, and I also understand what staff is saying, and that's really hard to enforce. And whether that should be the fault of but I see that would potentially make it part of the staying within compliance and under the hypothetical situation, I suppose. So I don't know. I kind of appreciate the sentiments for sure.
Commissioner West.
I also appreciate the sentiment. Like, if I were a neighbor and there were drivers, I would be frustrated. I think I do land on that it would be really hard to enforce, and would I think what for me really decides it is that we are creating an expectation that it is enforceable, and I worry that that will cause a lot of heartache.
Can I suggest that we just have them bring back something and we can make a decision on that next time? You cool with that? Yeah, Commissioner Mitchell.
If I could just add, some neighborhoods have special things you wouldn't even expect. Like, if you were going down my parents' driveway, you would need to be told if you go over 10 miles an hour, you may be shot. Just kidding. But stuff like that. There's lots of kids in the area. Please be considerate of that. Those types of things should be pointed out in your sort of intro, but we can't regulate common sense. So something that strikes the balance between you really should know this and you should know this on your own, I would love to see.
And I agree with that. And to keep it simple, I would add paragraph H to just say traffic etiquette, and where appropriate, the rental owner needs to communicate to the occupants the appropriate traffic restrictions or limits in the area, and endeavor to comply.
Yep. Commissioner Mulder.
I was just hoping one way or another, if there's a consensus, then there would be something for staff to come back, but if there's not consensus, I'm totally fine. I don't want to burden staff with undue work. Like, if there isn't consensus to add some sort of language like that, I don't want to burden them.
I heard consensus.
I think
We'll
there's
come back with
consensus. Okay. So we are, basically at or nearly at the time that we were going to give this. There's still one more alternative that's new on the last page. So maybe I'll hand it back to you, Mr. McNamara.
Thank you. Are you all right with me proceeding to the alternative? Alrighty. So alternative 9 was added to address private parties and gatherings, specifically because these are the #1 source of complaints, which have the potential to lead to a violation potentially. 20 was identified by many in public comment as a very high number, operators included, who actually want to be able to protect their short-term rental permit and not have complaints. And so alternative 9 was added, which just states that you shall have no more than twice the maximum occupancy of the short-term rental during appropriate hours. So I'll go ahead and close there.
Like on the wall, it says maximum occupancy 100 people, but I'm gonna have a party, so I'm gonna bring 200 people into the room. Like, I know maybe it refers to the maximum occupancy that you stated earlier, but maybe the way it's written.
So if I may address the occupancy would be 2 adults per bedroom, plus 1 overall in the short-term rental, and that excludes children. And 20 currently would be the cap on that. As it's written, this alternative allows for flexibility to that.
I understand, but I'm just saying the language itself says, you know, you can exceed to me, maximum occupancy is the maximum number. So maybe it just needs to be reworded.
So your concern is that the maximum occupancy of this section, as stated above.
Yes, right, because maximum to me means you don't let anybody else in the room you know, for fire or whatever, so just reword it a little bit.
I see a couple hands up. I think I saw you first.
So I'm just gonna say I'm not in support of alternative 9. I'm actually not even in support of 20. I think somewhere closer to 30 to 40. My grandson's birthday party, if we had rented a STR, we would have been in violation of this 20 attendees. I've been to multiple gatherings that would be in violation. I also understand that these can get out of hand, and I understand, but I'm not okay with going below 20, and I could see, you know, 30 or 40 just fine.
Commissioner Mitchell.
So I feel like if the gathering is indoors, I'm in agreement with Commissioner O'Neill. I'm presuming that this reflects some sort of outdoor activity, such as a wedding, and I could see going up to the numbers that Thomas is talking about. And I think there might need to be additional standards that would apply to things that get into that range, but without.
Special permit.
Right. Yes. Remember that on this point as well, what we're talking about is what would be allowed under an administrative permit. If you want to have bigger gatherings, you can seek that right under a special permit.
And I would say if you're gonna have your kid's birthday party, have it at your house, but we're talking about people that, this is something I read about, people go rent these and then they have these big old parties, tear the place apart, you know, and that's what we're trying to prevent here. Like, not, you know, you wanna have a kid's birthday party, but most people do that at their own home. They don't go rent somebody else's home and disrupt the whole neighborhood. Even if it's just a birthday party, it's a lot of people and cars and things that you're trying to, in a residential area, possibly.
And I think if I could just add one thing, one of the things Alternative 9 is intended to do is to scale the size of the gathering to the size of the house.
Yep.
Whereas 20 attendees in a small one-bedroom house may be a little large.
Right.
And secondly is that we heard the comments about parking. So if you're going to have social gatherings, private gatherings and parties at the short-term rental, you need to come in and say you're going to do that and show the parking, show where the parking's going to be.
Yep.
Through the chair to staff. So I heard you just a little bit ago say that through a special permit, someone could get this occupancy number increased. So what I just heard you say there, I actually would be in support of alternative 9. So then it would, you know, if someone's gonna have 20 people there at a party and it's only a one-bedroom house, if they're quiet and respectful, the neighbors probably aren't gonna complain. But if they're loud and they take up all the parking on the street, then they're probably gonna get, you know. So I've come back and now I understand that, but I would be supportive of some sort of language like they were talking about, 2 per bedroom plus 1.
That's in here somewhere.
But Commissioner O'Neill, she commented like that the statement of maximum occupancy, the wording wasn't the greatest, so some just coming back with some different language.
We'll reference the section.
Okay. But yeah, I actually like alternative 9. So with that said and with that explained, are we ready to vote on this one?
After Commissioner Mitchell makes a motion.
I would move that we accept alternative 9 as written.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Mitchell, seconded by Commissioner Landry. Any further discussion? Yes.
Point of clarification, just because we've been talking about it, use that as written. Does that include the staff change to reference the section?
Correct.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
And you could just voice vote this because constructive deliberation, I'm in support now.
Yeah, great. Okay, so can we have a voice vote, all in favor of the motion to approve alternative 9?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, so that one is unanimous. And we've already discussed the change to the hours in a different section, the noise from 6 a.m. to 8 a.m. I mean, I don't want to open this open wide, but is there any last very brief and succinct comment that anyone wishes to make to the staff about the revisions that we're asking them to bring back? Or are we good with what the discussion that we've had?
Mr. Chair, I appreciate the work they've been putting in on this and honing it in, polishing it up, fine tuning, listening to the community, listening to our deliberations. So I appreciate their work.
I do too. And thank you for being patient with our hammering of some of the finer details of this, but I feel good about where we've gotten.
I just have one question. Maybe I missed it and it's in here, but the grandfathered in, is that clear in here that everyone knows that? Okay.
I would say it is, yes.
Yeah.
All right, so no one's going to complain about that.
Yeah, Commissioner Mitchell.
There are two items that I would be talking about the next time this comes forward, so I just wanted to put these out as general comments, that the sort of the definition of LLC and getting the ownership needs to follow through to people, no matter how many LLCs or partnerships, and also make the comment that LLCs aren't companies, so the wording of
They aren't
LLCs
corporations.
or other corporations needs to be tweaked. And in addition, when we talk about the overall housing stock, I think that I agree with where we ended up. However, I would think that there's also a potential point at which even areas that we expect to have a large number of rentals, there should be sort of an absolute cutoff, even in Trinidad, West Haven, Shelter Cove, that there could be impacts to the character of the community. So the 2% overall, if we did a community plan area, should have a cap of, say, 10% or 15%, or a number that we haven't reached yet, but that we wouldn't allow to go over because of cumulative impacts. That's it.
If I could respond to that. That really is intended to be the section above that limits the number of rentals within a certain proximity to each other. So that it would be either 10% for smaller lots, or I think it'd go up to 20% for much larger lots. And if those numbers aren't right, that's really the discussion point, but that's what that's intended to accomplish.
Okay. Well, with that, I think we'll bring this to a close. Do we need to continue or we've already announced that we're gonna have a public hearing?
We need to continue it tonight to the November 16th meeting.
Okay. Let's just take care of that then.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. All in favor of continuing this item to the next meeting, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay. So be it. Thank you, and I'm sorry that we are not going to have quite a full hour, but it's nearly an hour remaining for the signs ordinance. And thanks a lot, Cade, for your work.
I'm not able to share screen, so I just need the permission for that.
Oh, you don't have permission to share screen?
I just joined the Zoom, so I just need to be brought in as a
Panelist.
There we go.
Can you share right now?
There we go.
About 6 or 7.
Yes. All right. Good evening, Commissioners. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Jacob Dunn, and tonight I'll be discussing the draft sign ordinance, and the changes that staff believe best serve the goals of the general plan and the interests of the public. This ordinance has been reviewed and revised numerous times after deliberation with supervising staff, planning director, stakeholders, and the public. So I will be discussing the goals, policies, and general plan implementation measures that affected the draft language and how they have been implemented. I will also provide an overview of the updates that have been made to the ordinance, and then I'll show you the draft ordinance language along with the strike-throughs of the previous language that have been revised. And after we've reviewed the ordinance, I will open the topic for discussion. So the two implementation measures initiating this review is Urban Lands Implementation Measure 8 and Scenic Resources Implementation Measure 2. These implementation measures instruct staff to review and update standards for signs, consider other revisions to the sign ordinance, and implement adopted policies for off-premise billboards.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, could we have this blown up?
My apologies. Let's see. So one of the primary goals for this ordinance is to conserve the scenic resources that contribute to the enjoyment of Humboldt County's abundant natural resources. The policies and standards that were followed included term limits for billboards, restrictions on impacts to sensitive habitats, and establishing permitting requirements for billboards. So going to the next one here. There we go. As we go through the draft ordinance, you'll notice changes to the formatting and language, which is more compatible with other portions of the code, as well as the coastal version of the sign ordinance. Temporary signs and performance standards have been added to make regulations clearer to the public and to staff. An existing billboard section has been added to the ordinance for specific standards regarding maintenance and removal of existing billboards. And a design standards section has also been added to protect night skies and reduce lighting and glare impacts to the public. Lastly, a prohibited sign section was added to protect the scenic quality of the county. So we'll get into the draft ordinance here. There we go. All right, so I'm going to briefly go through this with the commissioners and the public, so you can kind of we can get back to it after we go through it. So to begin, a purpose and applicability statement have been added to the ordinance for consideration when completing discretionary review of any sign permits, so just any special permits or anything like that. And then next is the nameplate section, which was reformatted with much of the same language as you see here. There's only a few portions that have been underlined. Going down, we have the temporary sign section, which was added to account for small events and other activities that may utilize signage just for a short period of time. These have limitations of 15 days, depending on after the event happens or before as well. Next, we have the property sale signage, which has also remained the same aside from reformatting and permit requirements being changed from conditional use permits to special permits, just due to conditional use permits being just much more costly and more time consuming. Appurtenant sign section here. So the appurtenant sign section has been modified to require special permits as well for discretionary review rather than a conditional use permit. Signage cited within commercial and industrial zoning districts will now require commercial services or industrial general land use designations for principal permitting. A table below here, you'll see sign types, and then there's a sign table. It's been included for the appurtenant sign section to provide specific performance standards for each of those sign types, and would simplify the approval of ministerial permits and provide clear framework for guidelines that can be easily understood by the public and by staff by simply just going through these tables here. Next, we have the existing billboard section, which is intended to create provisions for existing billboards that meet the goals, policies, and standards in the general plan. And so the first section provides a definition for existing billboards, which sets them apart from other off-premise signs. The second section emphasizes the need for an active outdoor advertising display permit. And then section 3 clarifies what is considered placement by the Outdoor Advertising Act, which local agencies have regulatory authority over. The next 3 sections should be considered contentious since they regulate maintenance activities and require building permit review for work proposed on existing billboards. It's important to note that the state has granted billboard owners the ability to conduct what's considered customary maintenance activities without review or permits. And there have been multiple comments regarding the legality of this language, and alternatives have been considered to remedy these concerns. So as an alternative, we suggest removing language about maintenance activities and creating clear definitions for placement as defined by the Outdoor Advertising Act. We also suggest including violations for activities that would be considered placement and not considered customary maintenance. And we suggest leaving the optional term limit for existing billboards. The reason these sections have been drafted this way was due to the goals, policies, and standards provided by the general plan. Review of maintenance activities would ensure that any impact to natural habitats are being mitigated and that the maintenance of an engineered structure is reviewed for compliance with California Building Code and the Uniform Sign Code. So these were focused on protecting public health, safety, welfare, and the natural environment. And then lastly, the final section of the existing billboards just provides an optional term limit for removal, which we suggest keeping, which would be consistent with policy 4 of the scenic resources section of the general plan. So next we get into the design standards for illumination. This provides specific standards that must be met for illuminated signage, which conforms with the goals of the dark sky standard. Further ordinances will be drafted, as was commented on earlier, for illumination that would be more specific, will make more specific requirements that would be met. So going through here. Lastly, we have the prohibited sign section, which was created to reduce the use of signs that have been considered public nuisances. This section provides clear definitions for the type of signs that are prohibited and aims to reduce the amount of visual impacts the public may face when operating motor vehicles and ensure that the view sheds of our county's high-value scenic forests, agriculture, river, and coastal areas are protected as stated in the general plan. So I'll kind of scroll through these ones here at the end. So there's off-premise signs, decorative signs, hazardous signs, obsolete signs, signs on public property, and signs on natural features, and roof signs and dilapidated signs. So something that has been brought up is that comments were received and initially were included in the notice packet for the October 19th hearing, but were not included in this packet for today. So I'll just kind of run through those comments that we got for tonight. So 2 people have expressed concern over piles of red tape that may limit businesses in Humboldt County. There's also concern over financial impacts on employees due to financial costs and burdens to the operator of billboards. There's also concern that Humboldt County is making business unattractive and that sizes in the appurtenant sign table should be modified. And then another comment we received advocates for the better regulation of billboards, digital signs, and lighting. There's also concern over the impacts that these may have on sensitive habitats and scenic views. There's also expressed concern over lighting guidelines not being strong enough and would like to see the pushing out of all billboards. Another commenter wants to see current billboards removed, digital signs blocked, and the lighting to be more restrictive. Someone else wants billboards restricted, limited, reduced, and eliminated. We also had comment about concern over the legality of the maintenance review requirements and just compensation for removal and other permitting requirements. We received comment regarding that the billboard ordinance should have real teeth, claim that surveys show the majority of Americans feel that billboards are intrusive and off-putting. Someone else sent appreciation for creating regs that protect view sheds, night sky, and safety. There's also support for removal of all billboards on the 101 corridor, in wetlands, and along scenic view sheds. And then lastly, we received additional comment regarding the concern of over-regulation of the maintenance activities and just compensation for removal of existing billboards. So that will conclude my presentation, and I will be available for question and comment.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dunn. I do want to have public comment, but before we go to public comment, are there any relatively quick questions for Mr. Dunn on the presentation?
I'll try to keep it quick. I have a couple. My first question was, I just wanted to clarify, as written in the billboard section, because we received comments on the legality, that you feel is legally defensible. I wasn't sure if you were suggesting some changes in addition to what's written, or if what's written is legally defensible.
So yeah, we were suggesting, after discussion today, we do suggest that we just get rid of the maintenance activities, the requirement for building permits on maintenance activities, just due to the state's allowance for customary maintenance, and instead regulating placement.
So, given the looks on some of the commissioners' faces, if I could follow up a little bit. What we're trying to do is thread a needle to say that, consistent with Business and Professions Code, absolutely billboard operators, owners get to maintain their billboard. Absolutely they do. The Business and Professions Code says that we can't issue permits to regulate that. We weren't trying to require permits to regulate that. We were trying to require permits to protect public health and safety because of the structure, consistent with the building code, and in situations where a billboard is located in a wetland or within ESHA, there are permits everybody else gets to obtain to conduct development in those areas. But it, at least to us, seems like a gray area, whether or not this is something that the courts would support or not. And so I think we've come to the conclusion that, the body of law militates against requiring permits. While we think we threaded the needle, probably from a legal standpoint, we would be vulnerable.
Commissioner Mitchell.
So I guess I would want to make sure that we adequately separated routine maintenance and things that can be done that look like maintenance but actually extend the useful life or make it last longer or worth more. And also,
No, they can absolutely do that. Absolutely, they can do that. They can absolutely put in new timbers. They can, as part of routine maintenance, they can absolutely rebuild the sign. And that's why we were trying to say that that should require a building permit. Because when you start making structural modifications to a sign, then it should be engineered, it should be reviewed for conformance with the building code. But the Business and Professions Code seems to say, local jurisdiction, you don't get to do that.
and that trumps the Coastal Act provisions about ESHA? Or
So for a local jurisdiction, yes, it's our understanding that the Coastal Commission is not relinquishing that fight just yet. This may be something you want to give a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors on, and think about that you're not really ready to relinquish that, but some of the comments that you did get from outdoor advertising industries, representatives, attorneys are arguing pretty fiercely.
I see Mr. Dunn's hand up, and then I'll get to you, Commissioner Mulder.
I just wanted to point out that when you were talking about adequately defining what is allowed or not allowed, that's what we were suggesting in terms of the placement, trying to figure out the legality of the term for placement and what that actually covers as to what a local jurisdiction is allowed to regulate. And so what we've considered is coming back with something that really just defines what that placement, what that means.
Yes,
Yeah, if I
Director
could
Ford.
just say, one of the things that often happens is you'll see a billboard get structurally altered by putting in kickers. That would be an expansion, that would be placement. Replacing a kicker would be maintenance.
What about replacing a tiny spindle with a giant 4x4?
So you're reading right into the struggles that we've been having.
So I guess if we're surveying the commission, I would like to recommend to whoever will listen that we should not relinquish more control than we are required to by law without incurring unnecessary legal challenges. But some challenges are necessary because gray areas are places where bad things can fester.
Commissioner Mulder.
So just point of clarification, we're removing 87.2.7.4, 0.5, and 0.6, is that correct? On the inland zone?
One moment.
This is where I wish I had it printed out.
Yes, and for point 6, I believe point 6 would be, instead of maintenance activities, it would be a violation for
Placement?
yeah, something that isn't considered placement. So the wording on that would just have to be that anything that's considered customary maintenance and not placement would result in a violation.
Is this the inland version?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. And then leaning towards, I know the county is in fiscal challenges. I would caution leaning hard one way or another and send a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors as they can weigh the financial options of where they want to draw the line in the sand with the budget they're willing to spend. That's just where I would come from.
Commissioner Mulder and then Commissioner West. Sorry, Commissioner Scavdall, I meant to say. Yeah.
Just a clarification on where existing billboards are. I mean, it just says within 660 feet of a state highway or freeway. So does that mean billboards along a county road, like Old Arcata Road or something like that, aren't impacted by this ordinance?
Those would be considered off-premise signs.
Okay. Thank you.
You had your hand up, Commissioner West?
I do, but it's on a different topic, so I want to make sure we unspool the billboard questions before I get to the next question.
Well, I think you should go for it because, yeah.
Okay.
We still have to
Because
get
of
to
time.
public comments.
I wanted to jump to temporary signs and specifically the political signs section, and was curious why, I think it was 15 days that was chosen, simply because I'm familiar with the standard being 90 days from Caltrans, and was curious why we chose a different number of days than the standard.
90 days? I don't want to look at political signs for 90 days.
There's no specific, I would say, no specific reasoning besides something that we came to as a decision as a group with other supervisors and based on just looking at similar regulations in other jurisdictions and the timeline that they give.
Commissioner Mulder, then Commissioner Mitchell.
So would now be the appropriate time that we highlight all of our questions, concerns of different areas? Or would it be public comment and then deliberate? What, we're just trying to,
Yeah, I was thinking we'd get to public comment before we do that.
because I mean, election signs was the beginning of it, and I got probably 8, 10 more.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sure there's a number of questions that many of us have, but why don't we now move to public comment? Okay. There aren't a great deal left either in the room or in the Zoom room. So I just want to first acknowledge the folks that are in the audience. Would either of you like to comment on this item? No? Okay. Then we will close public comment in person and open it to Zoom and phone. I do see one hand raised so far. That's Jeff Wills. Go ahead, Mr. Wills. You have 3 minutes.
Let me turn off my audio real quick on my computer.
Sure.
Just don't want to get echo. You guys hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay. I don't have my audio off. I cannot hear if you can hear me.
We can hear you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
Good evening, Commissioners. Jeff Wills. I own local billboard company, All Points Outdoor Inc., and I own local sign company, All Points Advertising Inc. Given that I'm Humboldt County's only licensed sign contractor, I am the single greatest stakeholder affected by this ordinance. I'm also can be the county's greatest resource to help staff in creating a good working sign ordinance. In addition to representing my sign business here, I'm also essentially representing all my clients, our county's local and national businesses. I've had a chance to go over this proposed ordinance in detail, and upon reading it, I immediately contacted Director Ford and Jacob Dunn, as this draft ordinance is not ready to be in front of your commission for a vote today. I asked Director Ford to pull this item from the agenda, or at least remove it from being a consent item, as it still needs work. Both Director Ford and Jacob Dunn insisted on keeping it as is, saying it needs to be presented to you all. They, however, both assured me that this would not be passed today and instead would be sent back for further revisions. This is at odds with the actual staff report that recommends this be adopted, but I do believe that recommendation came prior to me having a chance to weigh in on this current draft. I hope their hunch is correct and you will indeed allow us more time to correctly craft a sign ordinance that most suits the needs of businesses it regulates and also adheres to state law, because as it is currently written, it does not. In case their hunch is not correct and action might be taken, I would like to highlight the reasons why this cannot be adopted as it is written. My company, All Points Outdoor Inc., owns and operates 20 billboards in Humboldt County. I'm also business partners with Outfront Media and Lamar Outdoor. I've personally been their business partner since 2007, and All Points has been with them since the early 80s. Collectively, our 3 companies provide a vital tool for all of our local and national businesses to help promote themselves and increase their business. The current draft of the sign ordinance is illegally attempting to limit our business operations and strip us of our rights under California law. I hope you've had a chance to review both letters sent by Outfront and Lamar's attorneys. They have exposed all the sections of the sign ordinance off-premise regulations that conflict with state law. We cannot have a sign ordinance that conflicts with state law, and this needs to be corrected to prevent confusion and lawsuits in the future. For this ordinance is on-premise, regular signs that serve businesses on the property they occupy. It needs to be drafted in a manner that allows for and creates a simple path for businesses to obtain the types of signs they typically buy. To no fault of his own, Jacob, the planner that drafted this ordinance, does not know the details of the typical sign business used, and this draft ordinance is proof of that.
Sir, if you could wrap it up, please.
Allow myself and Jacob time to work on this draft over the next coming weeks to bring a refined sign ordinance that will actually line up with the signage needs of our community. I hope you understand the key issues I've highlighted.
Yes.
And I hope you allow us time to remedy this. Thanks.
Thank you so much for your input. Okay, I see one other hand up now. Please, if you are on Zoom or phone and wish to comment on this item, if you could raise your hand now so we know how many more comments we have. But as of now, we have Ray and Adam as the last hand raised. Go ahead. You have 3 minutes. Ray and Adam?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, now I can hear you, yes.
Oh, okay, super. Hello, I'd like to comment on this draft resolution right as it stands. I know for business owners, there are quite a few, permits to get through when either opening up a new business, changing outdoor signs. In that regard, I would not support more stringent ordinances for those types of signs, which would be on-premise signs, address signs, etc. But in the terms of billboards, monument, freestanding type signage, I would support a reduction and elimination of those types of signage. Oftentimes they are unthoughtful, unsightly, and contribute to an exacerbation in plastic use, as well as an overall distraction for drivers and a distraction from the scenic beauty that we have here in Humboldt County. A possible middle ground could be an incorporation of some sort of, resurgence of sign painterly techniques, incorporating local artists, and or just incorporating more of a design eye into billboards rather than attention seeking and attention grabbing visual garbage. In any case, I do support the provisions for dilapidated signs. We do have quite a few within the county, thinking specifically along the 101, as well as obsolete signs. I think this is, it's never at the top of the list for things, that are going on in the county, but I do think it's an important step forward and a very thoughtful ordinance as it is written so far. I do also would like to add, I appreciate the design standards in section 87.2.8 in terms of illumination, and look forward to seeing what the Planning Commission is presented with for other exterior illumination and dark sky ordinances. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your input. Okay, well, seeing no other hands raised on Zoom or phone, I am going to close public comments and bring it back to the commission for further discussion. Commissioner Mulder.
So, I have a list of things here. I don't agree with the political sign, the 15 days. I think we should be something more consistent. I've seen signs up for months before an election. I think it's actually not being allowed to have signs up for, someone that comes from a more rural area, I think gives you a disadvantage, not being able to have signs up. Some people might not even know who people are.
Chair Levy, might it be more beneficial to kind of walk through this sequentially and make comments on it so that everybody has a chance to comment on each section? I'm sorry, Commissioner Mulder, but I was just thinking how to do this most orderly.
Okay, you're suggesting we go back through section by section of the ordinance?
And have everybody just, same thing we did with short-term rental, provide comments on it, and then if there's consensus to make changes there, we can go back and make changes.
Sure, but Commissioner Mitchell has a point of order or question.
I guess just on that topic, considering the time and considering we know this has to be rewritten in parts, instead of going through section by section, would there be a more efficient way that you get some feedback from us, but not on sections that are irrelevant or won't lead to productive use of staff time?
So my thought is that if there's not a concern with the section, we don't have to stop and talk about it. But if there is a concern by, say, a majority of the commission, then it would be worthwhile to talk about what it looks like to make that change, where you want to see it go to. My concern is that I could end up, or we could end up as staff with 7 different sets of comments that don't really lead to a consensus. And then we would need to try to interpret what that means. That would be a very difficult place to operate from.
I have a comment. If there's any validity to the comments that there's, this is in violation of, the state law and all that, I don't want to talk about something that you're going to change, or if since you've put it out, you've realized that maybe there needs to be a change.
It's those 3 sections that we've already identified.
So then we can talk about everything else?
Yep.
Okay.
I would just add also that because we brought this up at essentially 9 p.m., there are people who would have commented and are surprised that we opened it up for such a short amount of time so late. I would prefer to have another opportunity for the public to comment towards the beginning of a meeting before I make any conclusions or decisions. Just me.
Commissioner Mulder.
Can we, I have comments all the way through, but can we go, because it seems like it's kind of a 2-part thing, if we go through this page by page and get somewhere, that's kind of how I'd like to do it, or let me finish my 10 comments and then I'll hit the road.
I think it probably does make sense to try to use the time we have to start at the beginning and go through. I just don't think we will have time to get through it all in that manner. And so that is the trade-off here, is that perhaps if people had the freedom to put suggestions on the table that we could all to discuss, we might get to the high points of what people's concerns are. So do you guys have a strong feeling? Should we start at the top and just get as far as we get? That's okay. All right, then we'll just start at the top and get as far as we get. That seems to be close to consensus. Okay. So,
does anybody have any concerns up until it gets to temporary signs? I guess would be the first part, to get right down to temporary signs.
yes, Commissioner West has a hand up. Yes,
it's not necessarily before we get to temporary signs, but I think this is the appropriate time to bring it up because we start talking about different kinds of signs.
By the way, are we looking at inland or coastal, and does it matter which one we're looking at here?
Question.
We are looking at inland, and coastal will resemble inland. The only difference will be the permit type. For some of the permits will be coastal development permits.
Okay, so we're all discussing the same document, we're looking at inland.
Relative to one of our public commenters, I think that it would be worth exploring. Eureka has what's called a creative sign. Type of sign that really gets at its intent. Let me just pull it up real quick. Is to encourage signs of unique design that exhibit a high degree of thoughtfulness, imagination, inventiveness, and spirit. There's a heck of a lot more to it that puts some sideboards on that, but it has been an opportunity in Eureka when someone's got a great idea but it doesn't quite fit the standards. This is a provision that lets people do something that really adds to the community, and it's an administrative process, so it reduces the burden on the commission.
I just want to say I really like that Commissioner West brought that up. That was one of the parts of the Eureka Code that did seem potentially worth emulating. Commissioner Mitchell?
I just wanted to echo that and make a high-level comment before we get into specifics, that my understanding is that the city of Eureka recently updated their ordinance. It went through the Coastal Commission review process, and things like the creative element that was there, and an outright, I believe, prohibition and removal of electronic billboards are things that I would hope that we would look to in crafting our ordinance. And just consistency in general, whether it be for political advertising or not, the fact that Eureka in general is split between our jurisdiction and the city and other places, people come to expect consistency. And I think it'd be easier to enforce if there was more consistency among jurisdictions.
Okay. Commissioner Mulder?
So, while we're on this theory of different things, purpose, number 4, support economically viable business serving county residents, workers, and visitors. I'm just going to say philosophically, that's great, but I feel that many of times within the language of this ordinance goes against that. I don't feel that it's very supportive or inviting to businesses, especially small businesses, and because of the economic condition Humboldt County is in, I think we should be doing everything in our power to be supporting business and not over-regulating people, and I'll leave it there.
Commissioner Scavdall?
Commissioner Mulder's comment there. And then also on the first part of the purpose, in promoting public health, safety, and welfare, I don't see anything in here about, and maybe it doesn't belong in a sign ordinance, I don't know, but I would like to see reflective address signs on our rural residents and businesses for public safety, and to allow our public safety and fire departments to actually find homes out in the rural parts of the county. So, and I don't, it seems silent to that, but I would like to see us do something about that.
Just so I'm clear, are you suggesting that that be required? Or
Well,
just a,
there, I'm a little, it says nameplates can't be illuminated. And when I read that, I'm thinking about big nameplates that has the big business name and an address on it. I agree with that, but I think there needs to be, not necessarily illuminated, I'm just saying a reflective address sign at the curb or street, or something that we can find places out there.
so you want to make sure that this is not somehow prohibiting that?
Not only prohibitive, I think it should be required.
Oh, so you are suggesting that it should
Yes.
be required? Okay. Commissioner West?
I can get behind that comment, but to speak to the purpose, I would be interested in seeing a part of the purpose be to, like, when we talk about appropriate scale and compatible with the nearby development and landscape, protect view sheds and neighborhood character.
Okay.
Or for purpose number 4, as Commissioner Mulder mentioned, I feel that the order suggests that number 4 be done to the extent it's consistent with the first 3. And I don't know that it reads that way, but I think it probably should.
That's a fair question, actually, or if I may put that question to staff. Do you believe that there is, in some ways, a priority of the listed purposes from 1 to 4? Is that intended, or is that just totally kind
No,
of
there's
random?
not, there's not a hierarchy there. I mean, they could be numbered differently.
Just, yeah, so there's no implied, right, okay. Commissioner Mulder?
And just to be clear, where I'm saying I feel number 4 is contradictory to what's written, I'm not talking about freeway signs or big billboards. I'm talking about sandwich signs, all of the, for sale signs, all of the different things that are the small businesses that are really, really, when you really look at this, I was on the road on Monday, so I got to go through my packet multiple times. I had 5.5 hours on the road, so it was, I'm well prepared.
I guess, and just to agree with you, number 4 seems to be at odds with the others potentially, and we would need to do more to have number 4 be a co-equal goal versus what's presented here.
Commissioner West?
When we talk about number 4, I think we may consider kind of workshopping the language a little bit. Like, when you look at the purpose, that's what's sort of kind of the underpinning of what makes something, not the only thing, I'm not a lawyer, but my understanding is that, like, it impacts how the courts see things. And so if we have an intention to support small businesses, but not necessarily like talk about billboards in the same way, perhaps we clarify that a little bit more in the purpose.
So just to try to draw that out, you're suggesting that perhaps even in the purpose, the first paragraph that begins with purpose, it could make a distinction between large billboards and other signs?
I'm not quite sure if I know the details of how we would parse that out. Maybe
Okay.
Commissioner Mulder does, but I think it's something worth considering for number 4.
Or at the very least, okay, yes, Commissioner Mulder.
Well, you look at number 1, ensure that signs within Humboldt County promote public health, safety, and welfare. How we fund that within the county is through Measure Z. If we don't have sales tax dollars through economic viability, we don't have the dollars. So maybe I've read too much and look at it differently, but I feel that if we overstretch and tell someone they can't have a sign out on a sidewalk because technically that's public right of way, that's going against trying to get tax dollars within our, so that's, it seems like we're on here for a long time on the purpose, but I don't want to take something and unintentionally overregulate it to the point that more businesses, especially small businesses, close up shop because they got turned in for a sign out on the street. And that's where I'm trying to, maybe I'm coming off a little bit more abrasive, and I apologize for that, but that's how I read this. If you really look at the letter of the law, it's like, oh, well, that's a violation, that's a violation.
Yes.
I agree with you, and I agree with what Commissioner West said. Either the ensuing specific ordinances don't support number 4, or number 4 needs to be rewritten in a way that actually reflects what we came up with. I would interpret it as number 4 as written to the extent it complies with goal 1, 2, and 3, but there's probably a better way to say that.
Mr. Dunn, sure.
Just to give some background, the purpose statement also was kind of built off of what the coastal ordinance currently has. So coastal ordinance currently has their purpose statement as the purpose of the regulations is to ensure that signs within Humboldt County will not impair the public health, safety, and welfare by being excessively intrusive. And 2, that any permitted sign will maintain visual quality and will be compatible with nearby development. So the inland portion of the code that was drafted and as well as included in the coastal is kind of built off of that as well, just for background reference.
Okay, thanks.
Maybe ask, I hear a lot of conflict with the ordinance. We've spent 20 minutes on the purpose section now. And so I'm sensing that perhaps this has just struck the wrong chord, and the commission really is dissatisfied with what's presented here, and if we've struck the wrong chord, maybe that's the place to start. Do we need to scrap this and take a different approach? Are you looking for something far different? Because earlier he's kind of made mention that this staff should go away and work on this, and I kind of wanted to know where, but maybe the where is the overall approach is viewed as being too restrictive. One of the things we tried to do here is to create a paradigm whereby if you came in, you complied with the requirements of the sign ordinance, it was an ministerial approval. That doesn't exist right now. Mm-hmm. And maybe we've gone too far in trying to define that. And so we're obviously not going to get too far tonight, but maybe help us understand just the big ticket items where, from a philosophical regulatory approach, where we failed.
I don't think that what you were hearing reflects my own view. I do think there's probably a few places where I think maybe we're being a little too strict for smaller signs and smaller businesses, but by and large, I actually thought you got the right balance of that. If anything, I'm disappointed that you're thinking, legally speaking, we need to back down on some of the limitations on maintenance. But, you know, that's only my perspective. I actually, by and large, thought this was a good, strong ordinance. That's what I thought most public comment wanted. I didn't have major problems with the purpose or any of that sort of high-level stuff. But, you know, others may disagree, and we haven't really had a chance to, everybody hasn't even weighed in yet, so I don't know what everybody's feeling. I see your hands up, Commissioner Mulder.
I keep talking. I'm going to clarify my struggles with this ordinance is not in the billboard section. It's more in the restrictions on businesses, size, and getting on that kind of stuff. The fact that someone can't put a sign on top of their roof that the building that they own, and they can't put a sign out in the street, and they're limited to one A-frame sign, whereas multiple businesses I've seen, they'll have one at like different intersections to help people find the way, and that's where I'm personally seeing the billboard stuff. Just to be clear, I'm not running into any problems with the billboard part. It's more of the small business signs, and that's where I see contradicting the purpose of economic viability.
Okay, who else has a hand up? Yes, you.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that what you took from our discussion on the purpose is not intended to reflect that you missed the mark in any way. I think this is 95% the way there. When I evaluate individual policies, I look to see, is it achieving the goals that were laid out? And that's why, for me, the goals are important. And if they appear to be like at odds, it's important to work out either what the priority is or to reword them so that they aren't at odds, so that each policy can either be consistent or not consistent with achieving those objectives. And that's why I kept talking about it. That's all.
If I could just respond to that. Sometimes part of the purpose is to express the tension that exists between promoting economic viability and protecting views, restricting clutter. And so it's not necessarily bad to have purpose statements that are contradictory, because it's spelling out there's tension in what we're trying to accomplish here.
Yes. Commissioner West.
I want to echo the sentiments that I also think we're very much in the right direction on this draft. For me, there are a couple things that I've seen successful, my experiences with the city of Eureka, to help sort of alleviate some of that tension with particularly small businesses and the challenge of going through so many permitting hoops, where I'm hoping we can see some language that has like clear design objectives to it, so that people can just check that box and figure it out, and hopefully have an avenue to do what they want to do without the visual clutter and without the distracting signs that I think are can be really troubling for neighborhood character and view sheds.
Commissioner Scavdell.
I actually thought the ordinance was very clear, and that may be part of the challenge here. It is very clear, and so we're digging into some of the details. I like that it's actually only 8 pages, and when you get rid of all these strikeouts, it's probably only 5 or 6 pages. I like that too, that it's concise. I think the purpose could be redrafted a bit to just support the idea that the purpose of these regulations are really to allow sign and signage that ensure all these other things. So I think if you just maybe start out with a little stronger statement that the purpose of this ordinance is to have signs. And then I think the devil's in the details, and you're going to hear that, the temporary signs, for example, I don't think there's a long enough time before event when you say only 15 days, but frankly, after the event, I'd like the signs down in 5 days or something. So I'd like a little more time up front, and political signs should be down the day after the election as far as I'm concerned, but give them a week. Those types of things, I think we can just adjust here and there. We did hear from one sign company. We also got comments, I think, from another sign company. Sign technology is changing. So, you know, billboards might be old, but other technologies are coming in with signs, and I don't know if it would be, might be worth a while to make sure that the sign companies do have opportunity to comment on this. They know what's going on in the market. They know what just, you know, helped with a business in Fortuna that had to get some signage, and there are economic price points because of the type of printing equipment and things that they have. So certain sizes, just changing a size dimension a little bit might work better with current technologies, those types of things. So it'd be good to get their input. Otherwise, overall, I think it's, I think there's gonna be a lot of interest, and this is well needed and well written. It's just down to the details.
Just to throw out, and you know, we're basically out of time here, but just a couple of other things that I thought maybe I wanted to discuss or hear whether it makes sense to add them to this ordinance, which are featured in the Eureka sign ordinance, is the master sign permit, the dealing with multiple signs in one location. Just want to make sure that that's not, that we don't miss that, because that certainly could be relevant in certain parts of the unincorporated county. And digital signs, it seems to be disallowing new digital signs. I'm not clear, though, does that pertain to existing signs? Can it pertain? Can we limit or prohibit existing, or, you know, I don't know if people want to, but I just wondered if that's something we want to discuss as well.
Only if you want to buy them.
Sorry?
Only if you want to buy them.
Only if you want to buy them, yeah, okay. Commissioner West, you have your hand up.
I also really like the master sign permit idea. And then similar to the billboards, could we explore how to handle non-conforming digital signs and not necessarily like make them remove them, but look at what it means to have them and changes to them over time?
Well,
I just have a small.
okay, small comments. We just have time for very small comments at this point.
As far as the digital signs go, I was curious whether the definition included a sign that was not illuminated, but there was an off-site projector illuminating it by other means, if that qualified under electronic billboards or not. Because I've seen that in other places as a way to get around the digital billboard requirements.
Thanks. We'll look at that.
Okay. Well, it's 9:30, so I guess we've just got to wrap this up. And you've heard, it's been a bit scattershot, but you've had some feedback and suggestions that we got across. I guess my question is, when do we continue this one to?
But really what depends on what you want us to do. If you want us to really try to rewrite what things based upon what we've heard, I would say continue it to the meeting in November. One of the things I wanted to bring up with you later tonight, is we're running into the holidays. And so December 21st would be the normal second meeting in December, which is awful close to Christmas. And so one of the things we were thinking about doing is proposing to the commission to meet one time in December. It could be at the regular meeting on December 7th, but one of the things that would happen there is then we're putting an agenda out at basically at Thanksgiving time. So to address that, have one meeting on December 14th, if that's workable. That's not a normal meeting date. And then when we're moving into January 4th, we can have a meeting on that date, but it's very close to the New Year's holiday. And I wasn't sure if the commission wanted to meet on that day. We've got plenty to keep the commission busy, so that's not the issue.
I guess one question I have, I appreciate the sensitivity to jamming up the holiday schedule, but if we were to reduce it to just one December meeting, and we've got one more in November, we're not going to do more than that. Is that enough? I mean, or does that just...
Probably not, but realistically, I recognize that people often have lives outside of the commission, and
Sure.
if people are planning trips and planning to get away, you know, maybe having meetings very close to that isn't as productive.
Well, and also the staff that has to do tasks in the, you know, often in the week right leading up to those meetings or even right after those meetings. So, I mean, that I want to be sensitive to the staff needs as well. So what do you guys think about just basically we could decide to consolidate December to just one meeting on the second Thursday, the 14th of December?
Could we not do the 7th and the 14th? Do 2 weeks in a row and then get the rest of the month off?
I'm fine with doing that. I kind of heard some comments about having 3 planning commission meetings in a row and wanted to be sensitive to that though too.
Feels like we just did that, didn't we?
Well, we did,
We're
but I mean,
surviving.
but I mean, honestly, we wouldn't have had a meeting for 3 weeks before the 7th, right? You know, because of the way the Thursdays fall and so forth. So, yes, Commissioner Mulder, what's your thought?
Can we agree what day we're gonna make a motion to continue this to and then talk schedule? So that way we aren't,
Well,
I would recommend continue it to November 16th.
I so move.
Second?
Okay, we have a motion and a second from Mulder and Mitchell to continue this item to November 16th, the next meeting. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Okay, so this is on the next meeting agenda. Then
So-
Commissioner Mulder.
3 meetings in a row is pretty rough, especially 3 meetings that have gone past the 9:30 hour. It's taxing
Yeah.
on me physically and mentally.
So you're saying you wouldn't want to do the 7th and the 14th in December? We're not going to do the 21st, to be clear. We wouldn't actually be doing 3 meetings in a row. We would be having 2 meetings in December, but a week apart. That's one possibility.
I could be okay with that, because then we would have like 3 weeks off. So, yeah.
Yeah, and you'd have 3 weeks off before, just to be clear. Because we'll have this meeting on the 16th, then nothing on the 23rd, nothing on the 30th, and then we would have it on the 7th. But yes.
I was just
Commissioner
going to ask if it's, from a noticing perspective, could we do a November 30th and a December 14th meeting? And then have that be it for the year?
Mitchell? No, but that's actually a week after Thanksgiving, you're saying. Oh, you're saying, sorry, what did you say?
I would just,
You mean that from the noticing?
the
Yeah,
noticing
got it,
stuff,
yeah.
they might be in there Friday after Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
Some of the, like,
That was why it was a question, because it would make it spaced out, take advantage of the 5th Thursday without putting commissioners and staff in 3 meetings in a row mode.
So your thinking is to go the 30th?
November 30th and December 14th, would that work?
Yeah, we could do that.
But to Commissioner Mulder's point, is that not making the staff have to get a lot of stuff done the day after Thanksgiving or the day before Thanksgiving?
Well, the agenda would have to go out on the 22nd.
Okay. If you're saying that's not overly burdensome to staff, then is it in favor of that?
So are we saying the 30th, the 7th, and the 14th?
Not the 7th. we're saying, as I understand it, the idea was to have a meeting in 2 weeks as scheduled, the 16th, then the 30th of November and the 14th of December.
Every 2 weeks.
And that would be it for December.
Yeah. So they'd be every 2 weeks for the next month, or, yeah, next 6 weeks, I guess, and then none for the rest of the year.
And then we go back to January regular.
Well, the director already mentioned that maybe January 4th, which would normally be the first meeting, is that too close to the new year?
I'm sorry. It wouldn't be a problem for me because the holiday's over.
Again, for my money, from my perspective, that's fine, just so long as it's not, as long as it's not putting staff in an awkward situation working between Christmas and New Year's.
I mean, there's going to be people who are working, and we can do the 4th, we can do the 18th.
Those would be the two normally scheduled
Those are
dates.
the normally scheduled days, yes.
So I think, unless nobody's arguing otherwise, we'll stick with those 2 dates for January, but we will change it up so that we have a November 30th meeting and a December 14th meeting after the next one.
Yep.
Okay. Well, thank you. I think, so that's settled. We don't need a motion on that, do we? No. All right. Any other very pressing business that people want to bring up at the last, yes, Mulder, Commissioner Mulder.
Under, I don't know, agenda items or whatever, at one point in time, it was talked about possibly getting us emails. I remember a year, maybe 2 years ago. I'm just gonna say personally, with the amount of public comments we've been getting, it's very challenging when you're sitting there in your emails responding with your limited time and then all the public comments that are coming into our emails. So just throwing that out there is something that I've noticed as a challenge for me.
I'm sorry, I'm not quite understanding what you're saying.
Well, our personal emails are getting bombarded with public comments.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm trying to say.
You're saying, and because they're on the website? Or
I don't know why, yeah. That's just.
We did look into that. There's some struggles with being able to do that from a cybersecurity standpoint.
Okay.
Struggles with being able to?
Provide the planning commission with email addresses.
Oh, I see. Okay. Yeah, we are getting a lot of email. It's
Yeah.
a fairly recent thing.
We're just getting bombarded with them, so it's just, I don't know.
We'll take another run at that. There is a new IT director. Maybe they land in a different place, but.
Okay.
And you could also create a planning commissioner Mitchell, email address that you put out there for the public that you just check when you want to get that.
That's basically where I'm going.
Yeah.
Now I just gotta figure out how to get that email on.
Okay. Well, thank you. Sorry to keep us over time, but I think with that, we will adjourn.